$900 Central Africa time on this Friday, the 1st of December. The year is gone, Kendall.
Yeah, it's almost gone. We're like counting down to New Year's Eve already. I am. I don't know about you. Good morning to you. My name is Kendall Mahama.
I'm Elvis Preston. We'll be with you until 12 o'clock. Jumbo Africa. Now today we focus on the annual World AIDS Day commemoration. As you know, we got 7 million South Africans currently living with HIV/AIDS in this country, Kendall.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal amount. It's astronomical. However, they are living with it. It's not a death sentence. We are living with it in our midst.
But we're asking you the question, what do you think we should do to stop the spread of HIV and AIDS in South Africa? That's the question, a very important one on the 1st of December.
In fact, Elvis, we're actually making it a little more personal. We're asking you, what are you doing to stop the spread of HIV and AIDS?
Well, there's the question. Here's what you're telling us. Mahafa?
I always educate young girls and boys about HIV/AIDS and encourage them to go and test so they can know their HIV status.
This one from Decor says we all should practice safe sex. And people that are infected should make sure that they take their treatment to suppress the virus.
You know what I'm finding interesting is how both these responses are not about what these respondents are saying and doing.
What are they
We're asking you, please, respond to the question, what are you doing to spread, to stop the spread of HIV?
That's the question put to you by Kendall. We put it to you that you have to respond to the question. But we're also talking about the other news about HIV and AIDS, about prevention, because that's important. That's the most important thing. How do we prevent it? Is HIV and AIDS prevention your responsibility as well?
165 votes in, and you know what? There are 93% of those 165 that say yes, it is their responsibility, whereas there is 7% that believe not. And I wonder why they would say that.
Yeah, of course, that is what we're looking at, and you're also talking to us about this. Romeo says, it starts with individuals' level of responsibility to make the right decisions by avoiding unprotected sex, to lessen or to eliminate the chances of contracting HIV/AIDS infection or other sexually transmitted diseases. Yes, it's your responsibility before anything else. Romeo, oh Romeo, I couldn't have said it better.
Michael Big M Solar comes in as well and says, yes, it is, even though there are many ways of getting infected by it, besides unprotected sex, because in the locations there's this stigma that if you are HIV positive, it simply means you've been sleeping around, which is not true.
Because the theme is, the right to know, prevention is my responsibility. That is why we're asking you that question, because prevention, my grandmother used to say, Kendall, is better than cure.
Absolutely, and she's so correct.
But we're also asking a sporting question.
Absolutely, we're asking a sporting question. We've got the Blitzbokker in action right now against Uganda, as Uganda scores a try against the run of play, mind you, as you can see. And it seems as if the Blitzbokker are looking to defend the Dubai Sevens title. We'll be bringing this to you, and we're asking you, who's the biggest threat to the Blitzbokker defending the Dubai Sevens title?
Well, I think the score was 14-7 there, was it? Yeah. Well, we'll bring you some more. Kendall will bring you more of that a little bit later. But right now, let's get down. Oh, yeah,
let's get some responses. Okay. Jennifer Rundle says the USA is the biggest threat to the Blitzbokker's
I wonder
defense.
Why?
They're very good.
Yes?
They're very good at sevens.
Vin says these conversions coming in, well, leave no points behind. We need this versus South Africa.
Vin is obviously Ugandan.
Yes. Well, there you have it. Keep them coming, read them as we continue. But right now, let's get down to business and take a look at your news headlines. People around the globe commemorate World AIDS Day, with South Africa focusing on preventing new infections. Metsimaholo. The results are expected to be announced amid reports of wrong ballot papers being used on the voting stations. We'll bring you more of that story. And the race for ANC leadership hots up as 3 more ANC provinces are expected to announce their preferred candidates. That's all in a run-up to the elective conference in December for the African National Congress. We'll bring you more of that, but first let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Elvis, thank you very much. We just saw a snippet of what's happening out in Dubai right now, Dubai Sevens. Well, good morning to you. This is what we've got for you today. We'll start off with this. World champions and pride of the nation, the Blitzbokke, kicked off the defense of their Dubai Sevens and World Series titles this morning. Let's have a look.
So good about this Blitzbokke team. They just go so deep in their squad. It's amazing.
Well, Justin Heddle, not quite on point with the restart there. He missed 5 events on the last series with a foot injury, so good to see him back. Another player is back for South Africa. We yet to see, I know he is out there, Kyle Brown, who also missed most of last season with a serious injury, so great to see him.
Right, now that's what we've got for you later on today, and we've also got other sporting news we're bringing you today, starting with this. And Battle's Premier coach Alistair Coutier makes 5 changes to starting 15 for South Africa's final test of the year against Wales in Cardiff. It's almost time for the Telkom knockout final between Bloemfontein Celtic and floundering PSL champions Piet Westwitz. All this and more we've got for you later on the Sports Bulletin. Do stay with Elvis as he's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this morning. Announcement of the Metsimaholo by-elections in Sasolburg in the Free State after the African National Congress, the South African Communist Party, the Democratic Alliance, as well as the Economic Freedom Fighters, amongst other parties, came head-to-head in a bid to have control of the area, which is expected to be made today, those announcements. Now, the elections has been marred by controversy, with reports of wrong ballot papers in one voting station in the by-election being used. For the first time in the history of the tripartite alliance, the SACP contested the elections alone and not supporting its alliance partner, the ANC. We will cross live to the announcement as soon as it happens. 3 African National Congress provinces, Mpumalanga, Northwest, as well as Gauteng, are expected to hold their provincial general councils. Mpumalanga's provincial chairperson, David Mabuza, has been mum on who's the preferred presidential candidate between Cyril Ramaphosa and Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. Instead, he's been calling for a united ANC leading to the 2019 general elections. Both candidates have been out and about in Mpumalanga, gunning for support at the province, which had come to be known as the kingmaker within the ANC. The province will be sending 736 voting delegates to the conference, making it the second biggest voting bloc after KwaZulu-Natal. Meanwhile, the Northwest and Gauteng will also hold their provincial general councils over the weekend. And we'll bring you more of those stories in a short while. Now, the ANC in the Eastern Cape has put forward the ANC Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, as its preferred candidate to succeed the President Jacob Zuma as party president in December. The party in the province held its provincial general council in East London to establish its preferred candidates. Ramaphosa and Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma were the 2 presidential candidates who garnered the most nominations, with Ramaphosa winning 423 to 61.
That is Comrade Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa.
The Eastern Cape rallying behind Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa as the next ANC president. The OR Tambo region, the biggest region in the province, also nominated Cyril Ramaphosa as party president. Here, he received 115 nominations, while Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma received 11.
We are happy and delighted because democracy is alive and working in the African National Congress. That is the expression of the view and the wishes of the branches of the Eastern Cape. And we are supporting it, and we are going to work, use it as a basis to lobby other provinces about the outcomes of the National Congress.
The announcement comes at a time when the ANC in the province is divided in the wake of the tumultuous elective conference in September. Those disputing the legitimacy of the newly elected PEC registered but were not part of the PGC. These include the former chairperson, Phumulo Maswala.
We have a problem with comrades who are leading the states, senior comrades of our movement, who are always missing in the action. We continue engaging on policy discussions, key people who are deployed by the African National Congress are not showing an interest, or they prioritize other things. This cannot be allowed. This cannot continue unabating. It is going to be stopped.
Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma was the preferred candidate of the Amatole region and garnered 45 nominations against the 34 for Ramaphosa.
Meanwhile, the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal should have opted for a rerun of the provincial conference to end the now long drawn-out legal battle. That's according to legal counsel for the applicants. The Pietermaritzburg High Court heard an application for leave to appeal by the ANC leadership in KwaZulu-Natal. This follows the September ruling that declared the 2015 elective conference null and void.
The interpretation of the ANC constitution is at the heart of this case, in particular the rule that speaks to the holding of provincial conferences. The now much debated rule states that a conference should be held at least every 4 years or more if requested by a third of the branches in the province. Legal counsel for the ANC, which is seeking leave to appeal, says there has been different interpretations of the rule, and they disagree with the court's interpretation, which led to them ruling against the ANC leadership. The 2015 conference was held 6 months ahead of schedule.
The point in relation to Rule 17.2.1 is simply relating to the authority to call the conference. The ANC constitution works off democracy. Democracy is aided by having elections. It aids democracy to have more elections than less.
Legal counsel for the applicants strongly object. Advocate Vim Trengrove says the rule is unambiguous. The applicants continue to accuse the party leadership of delaying tactics.
And it's very unfortunate because some of the arguments they are putting there was a stomach, politics, putting their personal matters front rather than considering to put the interest of the organization pambil.
While the ANC says their decision to appeal was necessary.
We think we have presented a good case. We both in terms of facts and legally. There was a strong legal argument, and in terms of facts, I think we were able to be clear.
Judgment has been reserved. I am Mhlongo, SABC News, Pietermaritzburg.
Supporters of Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma in the Northern Cape have accused the ANC Provincial Executive Committee of sidelining them. Disgruntled ANC branch members held a media briefing which was gate-crashed by supporters of the Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Chaos erupted as branches and regional leaders failed to agree. The briefing was organized by aggrieved ANC members from Francisbart, Namakwa, John Taulo Gaitsewe regions and the Provincial Youth League. This comes a day before 4 ANC regions in the province are expected to hold their conferences.
The REC does not really support any regional conference to take place because as the REC we don't have knowledge of the membership, how many members should we have.
Members are not in agreement about the current state of affairs in regional structures.
It has been long done. We can't be hanging over with the audit. We are not doing audit.
Since the province's General Council officially nominated Ramaphosa as party president, it has been followed by the disbandment of the Namakwa Region Regional Executive Council. This also includes the suspension of the Francisbart chairperson, Dr. Thapelo Dithebe.
It is a clear indication that we would disband because we do not go with the same perspective of the province.
They are being marginalized on the basis of supporting Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, nothing else.
The provincial ANC says its focus is to deal with ill discipline with no intention to victimize the anti-Ramaphosa slate.
As we speak, there are branches with different perspectives. They will go to the national conference and exercise their right there. Nobody's going to hinder or impede them to exercise their right. So we're not worried about that. We are worried about people who are flouting ANC processes.
The PEC remains confident that the processes leading up to branch general meetings were procedural. Neria Hlakutsa, SABC News, Kimberley.
Well, the motion of no confidence against the mayor of the Nelson Mandela Metro, Ethel Trollip, has failed, with 65 votes opposing the motion and 54 votes supporting the motion. The Nelson Mandela Bay Council is a 120-seat council. The motion was brought by the Patriotic Alliance leader Marlon Daniels and was seconded by the UDM's Mongameli Bobani. Also, Joburg Mayor Herman Mashaba survived a motion of no confidence against him.
A sort of failure to the Patriotic Alliance and a sort of failure to the Black Caucus, who was in favor of the motion to carry. The positive that came out of it, at least the cat came out of the bag. We were always skeptical about the EFF, who claims that they are opposition, yet they are in coalition, unofficially so, with the DA. And this motion, we found out way before the time that they are not going to support this motion, but we thought it's in the interest of the public that we use this motion to illustrate to the broader community out there where the EFF are genuinely aligned.
But we've now weathered a very difficult storm, and we are now going to put our stamp on this government. There are a couple of opportunistic people in the city that want the status quo to remain, where they want to continue looting in the city as per the book of Chippy Olver. I put my foot down when I arrived here as the mayor against corruption, and my foot is not going to go up.
We can be able to say today as the UTM, this is a sad day, but this is not the end of the road. We are going to immediately put another motion. That's what the residents want. We are going to put another motion so that in the next council meeting again, that motion will be debated.
We are still standing up on the resolution we have taken in 2016. We'll stand by it up until we see there's a need. But obviously we are guided by the structures of the organization in all the decisions that we have taken. Our people have been happy with the decision that we have taken, that we are not going to support the ANC. So our belief here was that this was just a ploy to bring the ANC back into power here, and which we are not going to allow.
Well, as you saw there, the DA mayors of Joburg as well as Port Elizabeth have survived those motions to oust them. The city of Joburg Mayor Herman Mashaba and the council speaker Vasco da Gama have been accused by the ANC of not delivering services to the people living in the city. But both these motions of no confidence were defeated, with the EFF swinging the vote in the DA's favor. The DA has 104 seats, while the EFF has 30, and the ANC 121 seats. And the question would be, why all these motions of no confidence at this time, just before the elective conference of the African National Congress? It's a question to think about, isn't it? But it's World AIDS Day today, and we're commemorating it. The annual World AIDS Day commemoration has great significance for South Africa. Now, as you know, South Africa has more than 7 million people living with HIV and AIDS, and we have the biggest treatment program in the world. This year will be 29 years since the World AIDS Day celebration was first held. The commemoration is dedicated to raising awareness of the AIDS pandemic that is caused by the spread of HIV infection. It also remembers and mourns those who lost their lives because of the disease. Unemployment and poverty in the Eastern Cape have been identified as the top contributors to the prevalence of HIV/AIDS among the youth. Young people are resorting to commercial sex and blessers to make ends meet. But in return, this behavior is putting them at risk of contracting the virus, as protection is often neglected because they are desperate. SABC's Mkita Manqinana joins us from the main event in Mthatha, that is in the Eastern Cape, and she is with a guest. A very good morning to you, Mkita. A very good morning to you, and tell us, why do you think the Eastern Cape has been chosen to host the 2017 World AIDS Main Day event?
A very good morning, Elvis, and a warm welcome to Bumbane, great place where we are today in the OR Tambo district of the Eastern Cape. What you're seeing there are some of the young virgins. There are 2,000 virgins that have converged to this great place this morning, trying to encourage other young people to abstain in their attempts of preventing themselves from getting HIV. The reason why, Elvis, this area, especially the OR Tambo area in the Eastern Cape, has been chosen for the national celebrations of the 29th commemoration of World AIDS Day is because the Eastern Cape has the third highest number of prevalence of new infections of HIV. Also, the OR Tambo region, which is the region where we are, is the one with the highest numbers of people living with this virus in the Eastern Cape. The KSD area is the contributing municipality into those numbers that are high up in the OR Tambo region. But these young people behind me are committing themselves, saying that not in my name, I will do what I can do to ensure that I prevent myself against the scourge of HIV and AIDS. Earlier this morning, we spoke to the MEC of the Department of Health, Umamo Pumza Tyanti, telling us about the access of ARV treatment, because now there's a new a program that says once you have tested positive for HIV, you are then encouraged to take your ARV treatment to suppress the viral load in your system, thus prolonging your lifespan and giving you the will to live a positive life. But now I'm going to speak to a young person who is part of the 2,000 young virgins that are here this morning. Uncebakazi Masumba, a very good morning and a warm welcome. You are a virgin. Congratulations. And tell me, what is it that encouraged you to join this group of young virgins?
Thank you. Good morning. Standing before you is Nabakazi Masumba in Mpondo Queen 2017-2018. I was one of the best in South Africa representing my culture. I was motivated that Indoni keeps us safe. It protects us and helps us to obtain. There's a saying that says books before boys because boys bring babies. Indoni tells us and teaches us we should keep our legs closed before marriage.
What is your view with relation to HIV and AIDS? I know you are here today, and the reason you are here, you want to send out a message. What is that message that you want to send out to other young people?
As we all know, today it's World AIDS Day. We are here to tell young people to focus on their studies and forget about everything which is outside. There's time for everything. There's time for change. Everything waits for everyone. They say you have to support and get enough careers from people who support you.
On what age can you join the group of Inqiyo?
In Inqiyo, you can join it from group of 4 years up until 24 years.
And then what happens after 24 years?
After 24 years, maybe you are blessed to get a husband, get married, or maybe you can continue. I know one of my friends in KZN who is getting married at the age of 35 years, still a virgin.
Thank you very much for your time, Ngabakazi. Well, you've heard it, Elvis. They are encouraging other young people to ensure that they abstain to prevent themselves from getting the infection into HIV. If I must just highlight, Elvis, that 2,000 new infections are recorded weekly in the country, especially between the ages of 15 and 24. So this is the reason why these young girls have come here to this great place this morning to say that they are encouraging other young children to abstain and to ensure that they protect themselves against the HIV/AIDS. Later today, the Deputy President of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, who's also the chairperson of the South African AIDS Council, will be delivering his speech of support to South Africans this morning, later today, telling people on the importance of making sure that they take their ARV treatment and they continue to protect themselves. Let me give you a taste of the song that is happening here behind us.
Now, Zumkita, earlier you spoke to the Premier of the Eastern Cape. What was his reaction to the situation in the province?
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Well, it looks like we've lost Zumkita there with all the euphoria and the dance moves. Maybe she's participating as well. Thank you so much. That was SABC's Zumkita Mngana. We'll pick up with her a little bit later on that. But of course, we're asking you that question, a very important question, because it all relates to you. What are you doing to stop the spread of HIV and AIDS in South Africa as we commemorate the 1st of December, that's today, on World AIDS Day? We're also reflecting on our poll because we'd like to check with you, is HIV/AIDS prevention perhaps your responsibility? And so far, 210 votes in and 94% of you are saying, yes, it's my responsibility. I'm very proud of you, South Africa and the African continent. 94% of you acknowledge that it is your responsibility. Only 6% disagree. I wonder, what are they thinking? Let's take a look at what you're telling me. Hashtag Save ANC says, we all have to practice what we preach. Nazim Grootboom says, safe sex is better than cure. That's what my grandmother used to say, Nazim. She says, safety is better than cure. Let me know what's on your mind. That's the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. I'll read them as we continue. But our picture of the day comes from Wayne Garner. And he says, hashtag World AIDS Day. Take a moment to remember those who've lost and the fight for healthcare and the right to stay alive. Very important message on this particular day. Our comment of the day comes from IMH. Positive today is hashtag World AIDS Day. Make an extra effort to raise that awareness to your friends and your loved ones. We can stop the spread and the stigma of HIV/AIDS. Every little effort counts. Well, that's our theme today. We're focusing on that, but we also have in our courts today a number of stories, and we're starting off here in the Western Cape, where 5 Cape Peninsula University of Technology students who allegedly torched the university shuttle on October the 23rd will be back in the Cape Town Magistrates Court. Now, they've been charged with arson, intimidation and public violence. The students are out on a 2,000 Rand bail each. On to KwaZulu-Natal, where 4 suspects accused of cannibalism are due to appear in the Escort Magistrates Court in the KZN Midlands. Now, they were arrested in August after one of them, a traditional healer, went to a local police station and says, I admit that I eat human flesh and I had enough of it. Well, the court is expected to decide on whether the 3 other accused, excluding Mbata, will be granted bail. And in Limpopo, the High Court in Polokwane has reserved judgment today in the case of whether the ANC Waterberg Regional Elective Conference in the province should continue or not. A faction of ANC members from about 7 branches in the region is challenging the holding of the Regional Elective Conference scheduled to start today, rather. Now, we'll keep you updated on all of these stories and developments on these cases, and you can keep them coming. We'll take a short break, but when we return, we focus on this very important day, World AIDS Day today, and we want to know from you a couple of questions that we pose to you. Is it your responsibility to stop the spread of AIDS, or HIV and AIDS for that matter? We'll take a short break.
Nagedi Matthews Posa is an attorney, politician and anti-apartheid activist. He was the top MK leader operating out of Mozambique in the 80s. One of the first 4 members of the ANC to enter South Africa from exile in 1990 in order to start the process of negotiation with the National Party government. Phosa was head of the ANC's legal department. He often tussled with the apartheid lawmakers over the investigation into the death of Chris Hani. During his time in office, he pioneered planning interactions between the private sector and government. He also spearheaded Nelson Mandela's reconciliation initiatives between the government and the Afrikaans-speaking community. Former Premier of Mpumalanga and former member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC. Phosa published a volume of poetry called Deur die Oog van 'n Held in 1996. Phosa received an Afrikaans award from ATKV.
The ANC is a democratic organization. These nominations indicate that character of the ANC. I said on one of your mediums that the more the merrier. Because if there's no competition for those positions, then we're imposing leadership on the branch of the ANC. It's very, very important that the branch of the ANC must express their views in line with the ANC being a democratic organization.
Together we rise.
Observed worldwide on the 1st of December since 1998, World AIDS Day is that time of the year where millions of people come together across the globe to commemorate those who've lost their lives to HIV, to applaud the progress made in responding to the epidemic, and to recommit to ending it. Now, World AIDS Day has been marked annually on the 1st of December since 1998. UN AIDS 2017, the global theme is Right to Health. And the South African National AIDS Council, SANEC, has set our national theme as, quote, I have a right to know my status. Prevention is my responsibility, close quote. Now, one of the objectives of this key concept is to reduce new HIV infections by more than 60%, from an estimated 270,000 last year to below 100,000 by 2022. As you know, 7 million people in South Africa currently live with HIV/AIDS. And according to the UN AIDS Gap report for 2016, only 48% have access to antiretroviral treatment, or ARVs. Now, we now speak to the Minister of Health. A little bit earlier we spoke to him, Dr. Oren Motsoaledi, who joined us from our Cape Town studios.
As we do it every year, we obviously take note of the amount of work we've done and the amount of work that is still awaiting us. Fortunately, this year, we are having a World AIDS Day when only a week ago, the Executive Director of UNAIDS, Mr. Michel Sidibe, released a global report on the status of HIV, a global report entitled The Right to Health, which he chose to release in South Africa, in Khayelitsha, and I attended that launch. Basically, the report is saying we've gone a long way, but we still have got a long way to travel. It says there are 21 million people globally who are on ARVs. We still have 16 million more to go. And out of these 21 million, 4.2 million are in South Africa only. And out of these 16 million to go, 2 million are in South Africa. That's basically what the report is saying, and we take note of that, and we're going to put all our plans around that report.
Are we turning the corner in relation to the fight against HIV and AIDS, Doctor?
Yes, we are turning the corner globally and even in our country, Elvis. But what is worrying is that we've noticed that we are making a lot of inroads on what you call biomedical intervention. We are still having a big challenge on prevention. And that is why in October, the UNAIDS and UFLPA called a meeting in Geneva, in Switzerland, where they launched a new program called Prevention Coalition. And each country has been given a quota of a percentage by which they must reduce the number of new infections. In fact, they've been given figures that you need to reduce your new infection from this figure to that. And they've given to every country around the world so that we try a new prevention revolution. Because the corner we have turned, which we did, is about biomedical intervention. I mean, you can imagine in South Africa, through prevention of mother-to-child transmission, by 2004, we had 70,000 babies born HIV positive. But now we've reduced that figure to less than 6,000 by 2014. So that is quite phenomenal. But the issue of prevention is something that we need to look at.
Talking about prevention, this year's theme is, and I quote, "I have a right to know my status. Prevention is my responsibility." Why is that so important?
Well, it's important because, as you know, in 2014, the International AIDS Society Conference, which was held in Melbourne, in Australia, adopted a concept called 90-90-90, where it says if that is achieved, then we can safely say we have brought HIV/AIDS in the world to an end. 90-90-90 means 90% of the people who are HIV positive in your country ought to know their status. And 90% of those who tested positive need to be on ARVs. And 90% of those who are on ARVs need to be virally suppressed. Now, we are all following the 90-90-90. Now, it means people have to know their status. And it becomes a right, which means the government must make facilities available when people want to know their status. But to prevent and not contract HIV/AIDS is your own responsibility. You can't put that responsibility in the hands of the state because it's through your own activities. So you take that responsibility, but the state gives you a right in terms of giving you facilities to test so that you know your status. Then it will also help the country to achieve the 90-90-90.
Last year's theme was, "It is in your hands to end HIV and TB." Did that particular campaign and the slogan and the theme worked?
Yes. Elvis, you are aware that we also have a sketch of TB apart from HIV and AIDS. And actually, when we say World AIDS Day, we also cannot forget TB, even though World TB Day is in March every year. But the two pandemics fit into each other. And so the pandemic of TB is also out of control. That is why we have taken a decision to take it to the United Nations, which event will happen in September next year, where it will go to the United Nations General Assembly for heads of state to start talking about TB. And in preparation of that, 2 weeks ago, we were in Moscow, in Russia, where 75 ministers of health, 1,000 delegates from 114 countries, the Deputy Secretary General of United Nations, the Director General of the World Organization, and the Executive Director of UNAIDS were in attendance to prepare for this high-level meeting about TB. And we said we won't bring an end to TB if we can't control HIV and AIDS. Similarly, if we can't fight TB, we won't be able to control HIV and AIDS.
Now, I know that one of the objectives and the key of the concept is to reduce HIV infections by 60% from an estimated 270,000 last year to below 100,000 by 2022. Is that even possible, Minister?
That is in our strategic plan, Elvis, which, by the way, was adopted before the Prevention Coalition Conference, which I said took place in Geneva, conducted by UNAIDS, UNFPA. They gave new figures. We said less than 100. They said specifically South Africa must reduce new infection from 270,000 to 88,000, and each country was given its quota. It is a mountain to climb, but that's what the world said we must do.
Yes. And in closing, Minister, your message for South Africans today?
Well, my message for South Africans today is exactly the theme. Prevention is your responsibility. You can't decide whether you want to be, in this era and time, you can't decide whether you want to contract this disease unless there is some form of violation or violence where you don't have control. But in most cases where you have got a choice, prevention is really your responsibility. It's in your hands.
That was the Minister of Health, Dr. Oron Motsoaledi, speaking to us from our Cape Town studios earlier. Now, the question that we posed to you, a very important one, because it relates to you, because they're asking you a direct question. What are you doing as an individual, as a family, as a community to stop the spread of HIV/AIDS in South Africa? That's the question. Let me know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on the Facebook page. And this is what you're telling me. This one from C4-Chaser ZA says, advising people to use a condom, no matter how the situation is, because those condoms were issued earlier with the Minister of Arts and Culture that gave you different colors and different flavors, of course. Oh, sorry, the president, deputy president giving you different flavors of those condoms. Tabo says, my kids are at an age of 7 and 10. I am already telling them about HIV and AIDS. Bravo, Tabo, wonderful. That's what a dad should do. Talk to them, give them education about HIV and AIDS and the dangers that it poses. Let's now take a look at what is, before we get to our interview, to look at the issues of HIV and AIDS and how it affects us as a society. Let's first take a look at the front pages from the newspapers from around the globe. And we start off in Europe. The Times report that the far-right group Britain's First boasted yesterday of an increase in support after President Donald Trump shared an anti-Muslim video that it had posted online. And then moving to Australia, the Australian says that the coalition government is turning on itself and turning itself inside out as it tries to justify the Banking Royal Commission. And finally, in China, the South China Morning Post reports that the military officials from China and the United States are stepping up communication on the Korean Peninsula situation, defense analysts said yesterday, as the generals from the two sides wrapped up talks. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back after that with our key interview on HIV and AIDS and what are we doing as a country and what is the strategy that we need to follow. Stay tuned, don't miss it.
Finally, getting the click in closer, right? Mowing the lawn without mowing the cable. When your washing machine gives you all your socks back.
With so many good deals at the Tops at Spa Subfest, you'll find any reason to celebrate. Get this case of 24 Lion Lager 500ml cans for only $199.99. Only at the Tops at Spa Subfest.
Baleka Mbete taught in Babana in Swaziland, worked for the African National Congress in several African cities, including Dar es Salaam, Nairobi, Gaborone, Harare, and Lusaka. Mbete became the first Secretary General of the ANC Women's League after the unbanning of the ANC. Amongst other leadership roles, she was the member of the Presidential Panel on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the ANC National Executive Committee, and the Pan-African Parliament. She was Deputy President to Kgalema Motlanthe in 2008. She's the current Speaker of the National Assembly of South Africa since 2014 and National Chairperson of the ANC. Mbete was awarded the 2016 King Legacy Award by the Martin Luther King Jr. Foundation in the United States for her distinguished leadership roles over the years and for her positive contributions in the global community.
I take with humility and it puts quite a burden on one's shoulders, but I guess also throughout one's life in struggle, maybe it was a preparation for this day.
The fourth National Strat Plan for the 2017-22 was launched in March this year, announcing bold and very ambitious targets. Now, it was first introduced in 2011. The South African National AIDS Council, SANAC, guides and coordinates the NSP. It advises government on all HIV and TB-related policies and programs and interventions in line with the National Strategic Plan. On this World AIDS Day 2017, now let's take a closer look at government's National Strategic Plan, or NSP, for HIV, TB, as well as STIs, with Dr. Malega Constance Kanaka, the Deputy CEO of SANAC. A very good morning to you, ma'am, and welcome.
Good morning, sir, and good morning to the viewers.
Before we reflect on the minister's interview that I had with him, I want you to tell us what is your thoughts on this very important day, World AIDS Day, the 1st of December.
The most important thing for me as a leader in the HIV/AIDS response, it's looking at where we come from and where we are today. Thinking of the strides that we have made as a country, from moving to a stage where very few people were on treatment and quite a number of people were dying from HIV. And today we now have 4.2 million people on treatment. But most importantly is to also look at the fact that more than 40 million South Africans are HIV negative.
Yes.
And for us, there's something that we should harness and see how we can keep these millions of South Africans HIV negative.
So what you are suggesting is the denial phase that we had is basically gone, and we've made great strides in order to get to that point where we can actually fight this fight.
Yes, we can do that.
Let's reflect on the Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi's interview that we had with him earlier. What do you make of that particular interview, and do you think that we are on the right track, as according to the Minister, where we are with the fight against HIV and AIDS?
Yes, I think we are. The Minister raised very important issues that we have been doing very well on the issues of biomedical interventions, to the extent that 4.2 million South Africans are on treatment. But he mentioned that one of the things that we need to do better is on prevention. That's where we are not doing very well, because we still have got a number of new infections, especially among young women and girls between the ages of 15 to 24. And we need to take responsibility for making sure that we can address those challenges that are still facing us as a country. Because if we don't do that, we are not going to be able to reach our targets. The Minister mentioned that we also have got to move into the mode of this prevention revolution. We have been tasked as a country to reduce new infections by 75%. And as you reflected earlier, that 270,000 South Africans were newly infected with HIV in 2016. And we had, as a country, targeted that we should reduce it by 100,000 by 2022. But what the UNAIDS is telling us is that you need to reduce by 75%, not by 2022, by 2020.
2020, so 2 years earlier.
2 years earlier.
So is that a concern, though, that we would be able not to make it?
We are putting mechanisms in place to be able to make it. We would want to address this infection with the rigor that we have never done before, so that we can focus in those areas where we have got the highest number of new infections. We should try to understand why are those areas highly burdened compared to the others, and address those issues that drive the epidemic. I think the Minister also indicated that we have not been doing well with social and structural drivers of the epidemic.
Yes.
Issues such as gender-based violence, alcohol intake, issues around poverty, issues around unemployment, which tend to link in those areas where we find that we have got the highest number of infections, we also find that there are quite a number of social and structural drivers that have not been addressed. So those are the areas where we need to look into. But we need to get into this prevention revolution by informing people more about conscientizing people all the time, and also, more importantly, dealing with the issue of stigma.
And of course, it starts with you as the individual.
Exactly, as the individual, taking responsibility.
Now, SANAC has said South Africa's theme for this year is, I have a right to know my status, prevention is my responsibility. Now, we're going with that particular theme because we want to find out from people whether they think that that is correct. What are the objectives of this theme?
The objectives of this theme is to make people to know that they have got to know their status. And of course, they have got to take responsibility for preventing new infections, whether you are infected or whether you are not infected. And whether you are in the family, whether you are in the community, know about things that you need to do in order to make sure that we don't get new infections to anybody else. So you are a leader in your own right. If you are in the family, if you are a parent in the family, it's your responsibility to educate your children. If you are a father, it's your responsibility to be a father to your children and to people around you. If you are a community leader, it's your responsibility as well to make sure that you do what is possible for you to be able to deal with the epidemic, to make sure that you are a spokesman for your community, and you make sure that you advocate for the people around you. If your clinic that is next to you does not offer services that you think they should offer, if there are no condoms in the clinic, you are the eye of the people. Make sure that you become the spokesman and the advocate for your community.
Because a lot of people would just say, no, it's government's responsibility to do this for us. But what is your responsibility? That is the main question, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's not what your government can do for you, but what you can do for yourself and the people.
Yes.
And your government. How effective are the NSP initiatives that has been introduced when we consider that South Africa still has the highest HIV epidemic in the world?
Well, the NSP 2017-2022 has decided that they are going to focus on impact. That is why the plan is actually cascaded to the lowest level of care, to the district, to the ward level. And the responsibility is cascaded as well, not just national taking responsibility or the province, but at district level, all sectors of society, not only government, not only Department of Health, all government departments, civil society organizations, traditional leaders, traditional healers, everybody else, communities themselves, at all levels must take responsibility. And if you look at our NSP, whether we talk about those 6 goals that communities must take responsibility for, goal 1 being prevention of new infections, it's everybody's responsibility, multi-sector. The government can only provide condoms, but taking condoms is the responsibility of everybody. When it comes to treatment, people must take treatment and adhere to treatment, and it's everybody's responsibility also not to stigmatize those who take treatment or those who are infected. And then the issue of key populations. We need to be able to now to begin to accept people who are different from us. The key populations would be men having sex with men, the sex workers, very important to make sure that we understand that they are there. They are the high-risk group. And therefore, the communities must begin to understand that they exist and therefore accept them in the communities so that they can be able to feel comfortable to go to and seek assistance at the clinics. And the issue of stigma really becomes everybody's responsibility.
You're going to hold that thought because we're going to expand on that issue of stigma in our communities after this, Doctor. We have to take a break, but this is my guest this morning here in studio, Dr. Malega Constance Kanaka, the Deputy CEO of SANAC, joining us in studio to talk about this very important issue on World AIDS Day, the 1st of December. But let's take a break because it's getting hot in here. Let's find out what's happening with the weather.
There's no Deputy CEO.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let's take a look at what's going on in terms of that weather. A 12-hour satellite loop reveals a lot of cloud cover developing through Central Africa and starting to develop as well through Southern Africa. First of all, we take a look at your rainfall forecast at the moment. We're seeing quite a bit of rainfall already forming through that Central African region into the interior parts of the Congo and surrounding areas as well. The far northern parts there of Angola also expecting some showers. At the moment, we're not really seeing any rainfall around Southern Africa. For the most part, there are, of course, some very, very light storms passing some areas. But as we progress through the day and into tomorrow, we're really going to see that a band of showers starts to develop into a typical summer rainfall pattern, and this is as we move through the evening. So afternoon and evening showers forecast for the eastern parts of South Africa, for the southwestern parts of Botswana, and into the Caprivi Strip and other northeastern areas of Namibia. So that's tomorrow's weather. We'll see isolated to scattered showers both today and tomorrow through South Africa. We also have a weather warning for you though, and that is a high veld fire danger weather warning over the northwestern interior as well as the central regions of South Africa for today. So please be very, very aware of that. Hot conditions moving through that area. They're 37 degrees in Uppington. Dar peaks at 35. Bloemfontein peaking at 35 as well. So very hot. As we see, showers are forecast towards the eastern parts of South Africa for today. Pretoria peaks at 32 degrees Celsius and Mbombela at 32 degrees. Now, Windhoek at 31 degrees Celsius is expecting some afternoon or evening showers, light rainfall there. And the same forecast for Gaborone there for a 37 degree maximum though. Beitbridge shares that 37 degree high. Temperatures in Antananarivo peak at 24 degrees. We're expecting quite a bit of rainfall in that Madagascar region. Now, Mombasa as well as Dar es Salaam expect 32 degree maximums. They also share a rainfall forecast of about a 30% chance of showers in the area. Kigali also expecting some rainfall, as well as most of the Central African regions here. We see showers and thunder showers continuing around Kinshasa, Brazzaville, and through to Libreville, should I say. We see Luanda peaking at 29 degrees. Now, it is expecting a little bit of rainfall around the Luanda area, possibly not quite in the main interior though. Now, we take a look at rainfall forecasts in the northern parts of Africa, and this is where it starts to get interesting. Again, the northern hemisphere just in its first day of winter for today, and we start to see that winter pattern developing already with a low pressure system bringing in some showers towards that far northern coastline around parts of Algeria and surrounding areas as well. As we move on into tomorrow, we see that continuing, that low pressure system strengthening in fact into tomorrow, and it is going to continue the very same rainfall pattern in that northern region, similar rainfall patterns through the rest of northern Africa as well. That's where we're going to leave your weather for now. Stay with us here on the SABC.
Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa is a South African politician, a skilled negotiator, businessman, activist, and former trade union leader. He was a visiting professor of law at Stanford University in the United States in October 1991. When Nelson Mandela was released from prison, Ramaphosa was chairperson of the National Reception Committee, former Secretary General of the African National Congress in 1991. Cyril was head of the negotiation team of the ANC in negotiating the end of apartheid with the National Party government. Elected the chairperson of Parliament's Constitutional Assembly in 1994 and played a central role in the government of national unity. He is the current deputy president under President Jacob Zuma since 2014.
I guess as deputy president of the ANC, I would have been aware. Let us move forward to build a credible and honest, patriotic leadership of the African National Congress. Let us move ahead to build a renewed ANC, a united ANC, an ANC that is united from top to bottom, bottom upwards. That is the type of ANC that our people want.
Siyavuma.
Now it's now 10:00 hours Central Africa time here on the Newsroom, Jumbo Africa, and a warm welcome. My name is Elvis Presley. We'll be with you until 12 o'clock today. It's a big day, of course, the annual World AIDS Day commemoration, with more than 7 million South Africans currently, of course, in South Africa living with HIV and AIDS. And that's why we're asking that very important question.
We also want to remind you, this is not a death sentence. People are living with HIV and AIDS because they're managing it. And we're asking you, what are you doing to stop the spread of HIV and AIDS in South Africa?
While you are tweeting us on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on the Facebook page, Aggie says, abstain from sex, and if you are married, abstain from extramarital affairs. Yes, those sugar daddies that, of course, embracing these young girls, and then what happens? The spread continues.
Lekhaza comes in and says, I'm a community leader, so I keep on telling them to get tested regularly because I'm doing that 4 times a year. Now, what Lekhaza is doing is exactly what we asked for. Tell us what you are doing. And Lekhaza gets tested 4 times a year.
And he's doing something very positive. Yes, there's other people that are suggesting that they are speaking to their children at a very young age.
Oh, fantastic.
To sensitize them.
Oh, yes.
To make them aware. But we continue with this theme because it is the 1st of December. It marks World AIDS Day. And the theme for this year is the right to know. Prevention is my responsibility.
And therefore, we want you to tell us, is HIV and AIDS prevention your responsibility or not?
Well, 93% now are saying yes, and there's a growing number of no's. It was first 6%, Kendall. Now it's 7% from those 243 votes that we have in.
Well, we've got 78 more votes than we had a little earlier this morning, and very interesting. Desley Fellow says, prevention is better than cure. Let us educate the world about it. We can't finish it, but we can reduce it, says Desley.
Well, there you have it, Desley. Depends or depends, who says it's everyone's responsibility. Well, that's another thought there, but it starts with you.
Very interesting. It does. It starts with me. It starts with you, Elvis. It starts with you at home. Let's make sure that we actually eradicate it because we can. So, we get into our sports question for the day. The big weekend is here. The Blitzbokke have embarked on the defense of their World Series title as well as their Dubai Sevens title. I want to find out. They won. They won the match against Uganda, 19-10. We were expecting it. I was actually expecting a record score, but we want to find out from you who's the biggest threat to the Blitzbokke and defending their Dubai Sevens title.
Let's take a look at what you are telling us. This one says Fiji from Connor Finchman. They're a very good team.
Always are. I think the top team in sevens in the world. Nazim Grootboom comes on with one from left field. He says Samoa. Very interesting.
Well, interesting thoughts, but keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But right now, let's get down to business and take a look at your news headlines. People around the globe commemorate World AIDS Day in South Africa, and with South Africa focusing on preventing new infections today. Metsi Maholo. The results are expected to be announced amid reports of wrong ballot papers being used on voting stations. And the race for the ANC leadership hots up as 3 more ANC provinces are expected to announce their preferred candidate. Those are your headlines, but before we get there, let's find out from Kendo Makamate. What's happening on the sports front?
Well, like I said, the Blitzbokke have won their opening match. In fact, that is one of my top headlines for today. It's a big weekend. Telkom knockout coming up as well as maybe, possibly, Alistair Gutierrez's very last match in charge of the Springboks.
Well, that's a big one.
Yes, it brings a smile on a lot of people's dials, but more about all that a little later. Here we go. This is what we've got for you today.
Agaba outside him, finds big Agaba, and he's away.
World champions and the pride of the nation, the Blitzbokker, kick off the defense of their Dubai Sevens and World Series titles with a 19-10 victory over Uganda. And in battle, Springbok coach Alistair Coetzee makes 5 changes to his starting 15 for South Africa's final test of the year against Wales and Cardiff. It's almost time for the Telkom knockout final between Bloemfontein Celtic and floundering PSL champions Wits. As we get ready for the weekend, I'll be preparing all these stories and more for you later on in about 40 minutes time or so. For now, it's back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Our top story this morning, the annual World AIDS Day commemoration has great significance for South Africa. Now, in South Africa, we have more than 7 million people living with HIV and AIDS and has the biggest treatment program in the world. This year will be 29 years since the World AIDS Day celebrations was first held. The commemoration is dedicated to raising awareness of the HIV infection. It also mourns those who lost their lives because of the disease.
The Eastern Cape has the 3rd highest number of people living with HIV in South Africa. The OR Tambo region has the highest number of people infected in this province. Here, as in most parts of the country, social problems like the abuse of alcohol, unemployment, and commercial sex are fueling the spread of HIV. Gangelizwe Township in Mthatha is a HIV hotspot.
There are 3 main reasons why we're bringing this event here. The first reason is that OR Tambo is the highest leading district in the Eastern Cape province in terms of HIV prevalence. Secondly, OR Tambo is the NHI pilot. We want to look at progress that has been made so far in terms of the NHI project. Thirdly, we have chosen OR Tambo because this is the year of OR Tambo. We wanted as the health and, to be specific, HIV sector to also participate in OR Tambo celebrations because we believe that one of his visions was to provide free health to all. And we think that that is the opportunity that the NHI is bringing forward. We think as part of this World AIDS Day heritage, we want to make sure that we give birth to a movement that will make sure that free health for all in the Eastern Cape and in South Africa becomes a reality in the next few years.
People living with HIV are appreciative of the interventions by the government and NGOs to fight the disease. They also encourage people to know their status and get treatment or continue to play safe.
Umuntu omameleyo othi osanda ufumana status sakhe into uphila ne-HIV ndingathi kuye.
If you have just tested positive to HIV, my advice to you will be that HIV is not a death sentence. There's also no time for asking who infected you. Treatment is available for all of us. We do not want to see anyone becoming sick to an extent that anyone can see that you are HIV positive. You do not wait until you are sick before you can take treatment. Just take your treatment and you will be fine.
Makabe nethemba loba uzophila makatye itreatment yakhe ngamaxesha onke kwenzela baphila ubomi obude.
Traditional leaders are also on board. Partnerships with relevant stakeholders are seen as key to conquer HIV/AIDS.
Even in the Royal Palace, we need condoms. We need an HIV HCT testing center here, so that every time people come for whatever reason to the Royal Palace, they can be accessing condoms, accessing treatment, accessing testing, accessing counseling, because it's about time that we make sure that our people are making sure that they work towards eradicating AIDS as much as we're working towards eradicating poverty.
The work done to reduce the number of infections and the wide-ranging treatment campaign is paying off. According to UNAIDS, HIV infections in South Africa have since 2010 decreased by 49% and AIDS-related deaths by 29%. Simkita Manqinana, SABC News, Eastern Cape.
Now, early on, we spoke about stigma and discrimination, and these are one of the major challenges faced by people living with HIV. Through community support groups, people living with HIV are able to support each other and educate those who do not have the knowledge about the importance of taking ARV treatment, and they are living a healthy lifestyle. Now, as the world commemorates World AIDS Day today, our reporter Zimkita Mklinana continued, and she went into rural Eastern Cape and filed this report.
This is one of thousands of HIV support groups across the country. Here, people affected and infected with HIV laugh, cry, and educate each other. The aim is to reduce HIV infections in the country and encourage those infected with the virus to take their treatment. Nonzaliseko Ntwana has been living with the virus for more than 12 years. She says it was difficult to accept her status, but through a support group, she started taking her treatment and living a positive life. She now shares her knowledge to help others.
We help one another with information. I disclosed my status, when I tested and why. Unfortunately, I never had access to the single pill treatment.
This LGBTI group also says it faces challenges relating to reinfection.
We are exposed in some areas where we get STIs. So when we visit our clinics, we don't get the treatment as other people because they say you must come with your partner. Then if I bring you a Zim, in fact, if they say I must bring my partner, they assume that I must bring a man, of which I'm not dating men, I'm dating girls. So if you come with a lady, they discriminate you and they do some hate speech, so we end up not going to the facilities. In our facilities, we don't have the dental dams, the lubricants, and the finger condoms, so we have to buy them, of which we're not all working. So we are suffering a lot. We don't know how are we going to reach the 90-90 strategy.
Children living with HIV is another challenge. There are no visible support groups for them.
The ARVs should be told by their parents from their homes, so that they should be aware that they are using these ARVs and they should be able to accept their status. We as UTAC also need assistance from e-health facilities, from other organizations, so that we can conquer this HIV and AIDS.
UNAIDS has ambitions that by 2020, 90% of people living with HIV will know their HIV status, and those people diagnosed will receive sustainable antiretroviral treatment. Health NGOs say this will only be reached if they push towards working together, both in private and government sectors. Zimkita Mklinana, SABC News, Eastern Cape.
Rolling coverage of World AIDS Day today, and we continue with our conversation with Dr. Malega Constance Kanaka, the Executive Manager for the National Strategic Plan at the South African National AIDS Council, SANEC. Doctor, let's continue where we left off. Now, you just heard that report from our reporter talking about stigma. You touched on that before we took that break. Why is stigma still a problem within our communities?
Stigma will remain a problem within our communities because the HIV is not accepted as just as another illness. It is associated with behavior. People are vilified if they are having HIV, and that's a problem because we are all affected by HIV.
Yes.
And if we can just begin to change our attitude and begin to see that it is not about those that are infected. We are all affected. These people that are infected with HIV, they are our brothers, they are our sisters, they are our family. They are our own people who belong to this nation, South Africa. They are South Africans. So HIV is just like any other illness. It is just a chronic illness like any other illness.
It's like flu.
It's like flu, it's like any chronic hypertension, it's like diabetes.
All right. Now, you talked about key populations as well, and you've heard in that package, another key population is women living with women or having interactions with women that are not being treated fairly in relation to the stigma that they're being confronted with in those communities.
Yes. we have that issue where the whole LGBTI group, that is lesbians, gays, people who inject drugs and so forth, that are being stigmatized for who they are. And people forget that these people are who they are.
Yeah.
So that is the first thing that to think of. But as a country, we have developed a plan for this LGBTI group, the lesbians and gays, so that we educate people about what their needs are and that they should be accepted. And that, in fact, not only be accepted by the community, we also find that even the health workers, as this lady has been saying, even the health workers, they discriminate against them. They don't understand when they bring a partner who is a woman because they expect the partner to be a man.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. It's the same thing with the
men going to see.
The men having sex with men. If you say they must bring their partner, if they bring another man, then the health sector, some of the people, not all of them, you know, they discriminate upon them. They say, they begin, and that on its own, even if it's non-verbal communication, people can feel that discrimination, and therefore they are afraid to go to the health services. So until we deal with the issue of stigma and get people to understand and accept HIV as any other type of illness, we may not be able to respond positively.
Is there adequate awareness about this type of stigma? And is there perhaps weakness within the NSP that's not responding adequately enough to the critical needs of prevention?
We have done a stigma survey in the country where we get a sample of 10,000 people, which is quite a large sample.
Yes.
And that the things that we found out is that sometimes there are two types of stigma, external and internal stigma. And the internal one was the one that was even more profound, where people stigmatize themselves.
Yes.
As people living with HIV, they have got negative perceptions about themselves. And that is why, as the SANAC, we have developed a program that we are taking to all the provinces to deal with this issue of stigma, training people about how to deal with the issue of stigma and educating people about it. That program has been started in the provinces so that we could deal with the issue of stigma.
That sounds fantastic. What are the NSP's targets for PrEP or pre-exposure prophylaxis, and which groups has it been rolled out to thus far, Doctor?
The targets for PrEP, they are very difficult to make now. We did not develop any specific target but we said we were going to roll out PrEP for the sex workers as a sort of a pilot, and then from there we can scale up. But that does not mean that if there are people who are ready to take PrEP, they may not come up to the clinic to take that, because they've got to take PrEP and be taken through an education program, so that they should take PrEP for some time before they can engage into risky behaviors. So currently, as a country, PrEP is available for all sex workers.
So anyone can go to a clinic or a hospital and they would be able to...
We currently, there are specific clinics where PrEP is available. But if you would want to know more about PrEP, anybody can go to the province or and phone the Department of Health, where they will be able to be told where they can go for PrEP. But I know that in all the sex worker sites, PrEP is available, but it does not discriminate. Even if you are not a sex worker, if you go there, you can get a PrEP available.
Now I want to look at those ambitious targets again, 2017 to 2022. One of those ambitious ones is to reduce new HIV infections from 270,000 to less than 100,000 per year, reduce TB infections from 450,000 to less than 315 per year. Now, the possibility of that to happen, and you also said that the date 2022 was moved forward to 2020.
We believe that as a country we can reach those targets, especially with the current NSP, which is cascaded to the lowest level. We are strengthening the ward AIDS councils, so that they take responsibility for the response, so that it doesn't become something that is sitting at national level, at provincial level. But the program must be sitting where the people are, at the ward level.
In conclusion, Doctor, your message for all South Africans today, either living with HIV or not.
My message for today is that test so that you know your status. And note that we have got 40 million, more than 40 million South Africans who are HIV negative. Maintain that HIV negative status by making sure that you do not participate in risky behaviors. Use condoms and make sure that you educate your community yourself and you take responsibility for the whole HIV response. As every individual in this country, your action will count.
Doctor, I thank you so much for joining us here in the studio. That was the Executive Manager for the National Strategic Plan at South Africa's National AIDS Council, SANEC, joining us here. And that's why we're asking you a question, a very important question, as well as we're also conducting a poll. We'd like to test with you. Your responsibility. Is HIV/AIDS prevention your responsibility? There are the numbers. 243 votes in thus far, 93%. I'm very encouraged by your responsibility, taking that responsibility that it's yours. And only 7% of you don't agree. You're also tweeting us on that matter. I'll take a look at some of those comments. If we do have them now, we'll take them now, if not a little bit later. But there's also a question, of course, that we want to ask with you in relation to the AIDS Day today, World AIDS Day. There it is. What are you doing to stop the spread of HIV and AIDS in South Africa? Let me know what's on your mind at SABC Newsroom. This one coming from Tanganda says, the only effective way is to stick to one partner and abstaining if you're not married. Well, that's good advice. No extramarital sex, no AIDS, says Mangaro. Extramarital sex, premarital sex, affairs with other women / men, hashtag one wife, hashtag one husband, hashtag AIDS Day 2017. Good advice, Mangaro. Bongani says, the World AIDS Day 2017 reminds me that a family friend has been living with the virus since 1998. Husband only passed away in 2014. It's really not a death sentence. 19 years later, and she's still healthy and strong. Bravo, bravo. Number of hand claps there from Bongani. You can do the same. Let me know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. We'll take it as we commemorate World AIDS Day. But let's now move on to other news making headlines. Announcement of the Metsimaholo by-elections in Sasolburg, which is a very important one in the Free State, after the ANC, SACP, the DA and the EFF, among other parties, came head-to-head in a bid to have control of the area, is expected to be made today. The elections has been marred by controversy, with reports of wrong ballot papers in one voting station in by-elections being used. For the first time in the history of the tripartite alliance, the SACP contested the elections alone and not supporting its alliance partners. Now, we will cross live to the announcement as soon as it happens. Now, the ANC in Mpumalanga will hold its long-awaited Provincial General Council at the Mbombela Stadium today. The PGC is critical for the party's National Elective Conference to take place in Johannesburg this month. The provincial chairperson, David Mabuza, has been mum on who's the preferred presidential candidate between Cyril Ramaphosa, CR17, and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, NDZ. Instead, he's keen on calling for a united ANC, leading to the 2019 general elections. Both candidates have been out and about in Mpumalanga, gunning for support at the province, which had come to be known as the kingmaker within the African National Congress. The province will be spending 736 voting delegates to the conference, making it the second biggest voting bloc after KwaZulu-Natal. Now, as you know, 3 ANC provinces, Mpumalanga, Northwest, as well as Gauteng, are expected to hold their provincial general councils. Meanwhile, the ANC in the Eastern Cape has put forward the ANC Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa as its preferred candidate to succeed the President Jacob Zuma as the party president in December. The party in the province held its provincial general council in East London to establish its preferred candidates. Ramaphosa and Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma were the two presidential candidates who garnered the most nominations, with Ramaphosa winning 423 to 61, which some call a lashing.
That is Comrade Madamela Cyril Ramaphosa.
The Eastern Cape rallying behind Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa as the next ANC president. The OR Tambo region, the biggest region in the province, also nominated Cyril Ramaphosa as party president. Here, he received 115 nominations, while Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma received 11.
We are happy and delighted because democracy is alive and working in the African National Congress. That is the expression of the view and the wishes of the branches of the Eastern Cape. And we are supporting it, and we are going to work, use it as a basis to lobby other provinces about the outcomes of the national congress.
The announcement comes at a time when the ANC in the province is divided in the wake of the tumultuous elective conference in September. Those disputing the legitimacy of the newly elected PEC registered but were not part of the PGC. These include the former chairperson, Phumulo Maswala.
We have a problem with comrades who are leading the states, senior comrades of our movement, who are always missing in the action. We continue engaging on policy discussions. Key people who are deployed by the African National Congress are not showing an interest, or they prioritize other things. This cannot be allowed. This cannot continue unabating. It is going to be stopped.
Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma was the preferred candidate of the Amatole region and garnered 45 nominations against the 34 for Ramaphosa.
The motion of no confidence against the mayor of the Nelson Mandela Metro, Ethel Trollip, has failed, with 65 votes opposing the motion and 54 votes supporting the motion. The Nelson Mandela Bay Council is a 120-seat council. The motion was brought by the Patriotic Alliance leader Marlon Daniels and was seconded by the UDM's Mongameli Bobani. The mayor of Johannesburg, Herman Mashaba, also survived a motion of no confidence against him.
It's not a failure to me. It's not a failure to the Patriotic Alliance, and it's not a failure to the Black Caucus, who was in favor of the motion to carry. The positive that came out of it, at least the cat came out of the bag. We were always skeptical about the EFF, who claims that they are opposition, yet they are in coalition, unofficially so, with the DA. And this motion, we found out way before the time that they are not going to support this motion, but we thought it's in the interest of the public that we use this motion to illustrate to the broader community out there where the EFF are genuinely aligned.
But we've now weathered a very difficult storm, and we are now going to put our stamp on this government. There are a couple of opportunistic people in the city that want the status quo to remain, where they want to continue looting in the city as per the book of Chippy Olver. I put my foot down when I arrived here as the mayor against corruption, and my foot is not going to go up.
We can be able to say today as the UTM, this is a set day, but this is not the end of the road. We are going to immediately put another motion. That's what the residents want. We're going to put another motion so that in the next council meeting again, that motion will be debated.
We are still standing up on the resolution we have taken in 2016. We'll stand by it up until we see there's a need. But obviously we are guided by the structures of the organization in all the decisions that we have taken. Our people have been happy with the decision that we have taken, that we are not going to support the ANC. So our belief here was that this was just a ploy to bring the ANC back into power here, at which we are not going to allow.
The DA mayors of Johannesburg and Port Elizabeth has survived those motions to oust them. The City of Johannesburg Mayor Herman Mashaba and the Council Speaker Vasco da Gama have been accused by the ANC of not delivering services to the people living in the city. But both motions of no confidence were defeated, with the EFF swinging the vote in the DA's favour as the kingmakers there. The Democratic Alliance has 104 seats, while the EFF has 30 and the ANC 121 seats. Moving across now to our neighbours, Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa has appointed a cabinet that includes 2 senior military officers in key posts. The cabinet does not include figures from the opposition to the former president Robert Mugabe. Mnangagwa appointed Sibusiso Moyo as the Foreign Affairs Minister. He is the Army Major General who announced the military takeover, which saw Mugabe stepping down a week later. The long-serving Air Force Commander Perence Shiri is the new Lands and Agricultural Minister. Mnangagwa kept a sizable number of ministers from Mugabe's former cabinet, including Patrick Chanamase. Further afield now, a barrage of criticism has been leveled against the United States president after he retweeted anti-Muslim videos, first posted by a far right-wing British party leader. The actions of the President Donald Trump has drawn fierce criticism from the United Kingdom, including the Prime Minister and several British MPs, Muslim groups and members of the United States Congress. The White House has since defended the President's actions, while Trump called on the British Prime Minister not to focus on him.
A series of Trump retweets of a fringe British ultra-nationalist party shows Muslims committing acts of violence. Actions quickly condemned in the United Kingdom.
The fact that we work together does not mean that we're afraid to say when we think the United States have got it wrong, and to be very clear with them. And I'm very clear that retweeting from Britain First was the wrong thing to do.
Several members of the British House of Commons have lambasted the United States President for promoting inflammatory content targeting Muslims, with concerns raised that it paints the religion with a broad brush of inaccuracy.
Britain First is an extremist organisation which seeks to divide communities through their use of hateful narratives which spread lies and stoke tensions. The deputy leader of Britain First is subject to a pending criminal trial, accused of religiously aggravated harassment over the alleged distribution of leaflets and the posting of online material. British people overwhelmingly reject the prejudiced rhetoric of the far right, which is the antithesis of the values that this country represents: decency, tolerancy, respect.
But this overnight tweet from Trump tells the British Prime Minister not to focus on him, but on radical Islamic terrorism taking place in the UK. Quote, "We are doing just fine."
Look, again, whether it's a real video, the threat is real, and that is what the president is talking about. That's what the president is focused on, is dealing with those real threats, and those are real no matter how you look at it.
The president's latest actions viewed as a pattern, including the banning of immigration from Muslim-majority countries. The Council on American Islamic Relations has accused Mr. Trump of bigotry and white supremacy, while in the United Kingdom, calls are growing for the government to rescind an invitation for a state visit due next year. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, known for his Twitter spats with the United States President, has suggested he not be invited on any official visit to Britain. But for now, the trip appears to be going ahead, despite almost 2 million signatures petitioning the government to cancel it. Sherwin Briceby's SABC News, New York.
The New York Times is reporting that President Donald Trump is weighing a final decision to replace his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who has only been in the job since February. Now, according to the report, Trump has had a strained relationship with his chief diplomat for months and could replace him with the current CIA director, Mike Pompeo, before the end of the year. Our correspondent, Sherwin Briceby, is again with us.
It's reported to be a transition plan set in motion by the White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, but it's unclear whether President Trump has signed off on the plan. There'd been speculation for months that he'd soured on Tillerson after the Secretary of State allegedly referred to his boss as a moron behind closed doors, using an expletive before the word moron. If confirmed, Tillerson's ouster would be the latest in a long list of Trump associates, including his former National Security Advisor, Chief of Staff, Press Secretary, FBI Director, his Chief Strategist, and his Secretary of Health and Human Services, who have all resigned or been fired mere months into their jobs. Tillerson's reign has been described as turbulent at the State Department, with several reports that he'd been marginalised by the White House or undermined by the President himself on major foreign policy issues, including the Iran nuclear deal and diplomatic efforts with North Korea. Mr. Tillerson is on record as rebutting claims that he would quit as late as October this year, saying he had never considered leaving his post. President Trump himself in October said he had total confidence in his Secretary of State. Sherman Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
With the stories of abuse from the other 8, but they haven't been ready to pursue any angles. They've offered their support, they've offered the comfort to the 8, and it's been an amazing journey.
It feels like your heart actually literally sunk in your shoes.
It wasn't a long encounter. I think at the time I froze.
The way the criminal justice system deals with sexual violence is problematic. And I don't know, unless there's a fundamental change in many things, the way prosecutors deal with the victim in the matter.
For all investigative insights, stay tuned to Special Assignment every Saturday at 17:30. We Cross Live, give updates and cover sport.
The observer missions, what are they saying?
It will be a very difficult announcement to make, to say whether these elections have been free and fair.
1 in every 100 people are diagnosed with arthritis daily. In an effort to raise awareness, a handful of elderly women, they took to the streets of Soweto to stretch their fight against the ailment.
Western Province upset the Sharks by 33 points to 21 to be crowned the 2017 Currie Cup champions at the Kings Park Stadium.
In Durban.
On time with weather every hour, all the time. For all news, stay tuned to AM News every Saturday and Sunday at 10:00 hours Central African Time.
On this World AIDS Day, we continue our focus on HIV/AIDS. Now, there's no official cure yet for HIV, but it is a manageable condition. In 2016, South Africa announced that thousands of HIV-negative sex workers will be eligible to receive antiretrovirals, or ARVs, to help prevent them from becoming infected with HIV. 3,000 sex workers were provided with HIV pre-exposure prophylaxis known as PrEP. Professor Linda Gale Becker, the Deputy Director of the Desmond Tutu HIV Centre at the University of Cape Town, says that the best news today, where new infections are concerned, is that HIV is preventable and the options for prevention have increased. She joins us now from our Cape Town studios. A very good morning to you, Professor, and welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here.
First and foremostly, for those who don't know, please tell us more about the pre-exposure prophylaxis known as PrEP.
Yeah, I think it's very important to recognize that although it involves antiretrovirals, it's intended to be taken by people who are not HIV infected. So it includes 2 antiretroviral agents, one called tenofovir, the other one emtricitabine, and they're combined into one single pill, which is taken every day by somebody who is tested HIV negative and feels that they would like to go on to that daily prophylactic. It's a little bit like anti-malarials. When you travel into a malaria area, you may be advised to take anti-malarials to prevent getting malaria. Or the other sort of analogy is contraception. Women are very used to taking the oral contraceptive as a way to prevent pregnancy. This is exactly the same context. It is also very important to know, though, that you are only protected as long as you are taking the pill every single day. So the pill has to be on board before exposure to HIV. And clinical research has shown that this is a very effective way to prevent HIV infection should you be exposed.
So you have to take it every day, but are there any negative impacts, such as side effects, for taking prophylaxis?
So, you know, antiretrovirals do have, they are drugs. They do have an initial impact on about 1 in 10 individuals who may feel a little bit of nausea, a little bit of bloating, some gastrointestinal abnormalities, and maybe a little bit of headache. But we are aware that those symptoms seem to settle down within a month or so, and then really it is pretty much, you know, just every day taking a pill, like one would one's vitamins. It is important, though, that we monitor renal function. So at the start of taking PrEP, you may be asked to provide a blood sample to make sure that the kidneys are functioning well, because these drugs are excreted via the kidneys. And so we want to be sure that there isn't an impact there.
Why is this
otherwise really very easy to take and not too many side effects at all?
Why is it so important to basically target sex workers in order for them to have access to PrEP?
Well, you know, I think I can't speak on behalf of the government, but I think the decision there was really to find a key population who are particularly at risk of HIV, and to roll out PrEP to see how the processes could work more broadly. I think PrEP is not specifically designed only for sex workers. In fact, you know, the World Health Organization advises that anybody who is at substantive risk of HIV acquisition should be offered PrEP. So I'm hopeful that government will, and I believe they are, moving beyond sex workers to other key populations, such as men who have sex with men. And we know in this country that young women and adolescent girls are also particularly at risk of HIV acquisition. So it's hopeful that PrEP will become more broadly available in the not too distant future.
Yes, because we've seen a marked increase of HIV, especially among young girls, like you just referred to, 15 and 24 years old. What can we attribute this to, though, Doctor? Professor, rather?
Well, you know, I think we continue to battle an understanding that HIV is still alive and well, that it has not gone away, that we do need to, each of us, take responsibility to make sure that we don't become HIV infected. But young women and girls are often not in a position to protect themselves, particularly when the only tool that is available to them is a male condom. And we know that in many relationships, young women, although they may have incredible resilience and may even have knowledge, situations arise where that ability to ask a partner to use the latex condom is just not feasible. We also know that a number of relationships occur under less than consensual situations. And again, in those circumstances, young women may not be able to protect themselves. So I think we are looking for ways that young women can actually protect themselves discreetly and have control. And I think pre-exposure prophylaxis is the first of that sort of set of tools that we are now working very hard to create, so that this particular population can take their own sexuality into their own hands and have control. Hopefully PrEP will be available to them soon, and we'll see those statistics begin to dive.
But how affordable is it to provide this to the country at large with the type of economic situation that we find ourselves as a country?
I think that is the conundrum, and you know, I think that is the the reason why I think we have to continue to advocate and to work very hard to say, you know, what exactly is the risk-benefit ratio of finding the money to be able to prevent HIV so that we reduce the number of people becoming infected. We already have a huge treatment pool, a large number of people who still have not been able to access treatment. This country has the biggest treatment program in the world. And clearly our priorities are to make sure that those who are living with HIV get onto treatment and stay on treatment, lifelong treatment. But I think there is still it is very important to recognize that there's a place for new prevention modalities such as PrEP, because we don't want that treatment pool to grow and grow and grow, because the question is, how will we keep paying for those drugs into perpetuity? So if we can also reduce infection, I think that is a cost-effective approach. The pill themselves in this country has come down. We now have generic forms of emtricitabine and tenofovir. And, you know, I think our government has been spectacular at driving those prices down and making those drugs available. So I'm hopeful that 2018 will see much more scale-up of pre-exposure prophylaxis as a prevention modality in this country.
Now, Professor Rather, despite the aggressive interventions and campaigns that South Africa has, we still have one of the highest infection rates in the world. Do you think that a time will come where we will ever be able to reverse this trend?
I am certainly hopeful. I'm also the president of the International AIDS Society, and certainly globally, we are believing that we need to move into the second era now of the HIV epidemic, which is about literally closing it down and moving forward towards hashtag Let's End It, as this World AIDS Day is about. I think we still have an enormous amount of work to do. There are regions in the world where the statistics actually the curves aren't going down, they're actually turning in the other direction. So, but we now have, you know, a toolbox that really makes it possible. We have treatment that is easy to take, it's effective. We know if people take their treatment and are undetectable, in other words, the virus is so low in their blood, there's very little chance that they will transmit the virus to others or to their unborn children. The prevention opportunities are also increasing. This country is working very hard on the clinical trial front to find a vaccine. So I do believe this is possible, but it's important that South Africans today know that HIV is not gone, it is not over. There is still a lot of work to be done, and we have to do it together. This is something we can overcome, but it really does need all of us to come together to say we can end it if we really put our minds to it.
Professor, thank you so much for joining us in our Cape Town studio.
It's a real pleasure, and thank you for
That was Professor Linda Gale Becker, the CEO of the Desmond Tutu HIV Foundation. She's highly regarded as an expert on PrEP. But right now, it's time for your sports news with Kendall Makamate.
Thank you very much, Elvis. A very interesting conversation you're having there on this day, World AIDS Day. Good morning to you. Time for the sports before we hit top of the hour. Start off with how South Africa appeared rusty as they started the defense of their Dubai and World Rugby 7 series titles with a 19-10 victory over Uganda in their opening match earlier today. The Blitzbokke led 14-0 at the break after scoring 2 tries through Ruan Nel and Philip Snyman. Timagaba scored the 3rd try for South Africa in the second half before they allowed Minnows Uganda to score 2 tries. Here's some of the highlights.
Africa outside him, runs at the line, South Africa gives it to Ruan Nel, and the first chance they get off the set piece, they show us what they're made of, the Blitzboks. Slightly lofted past the Snyman, Snyman's away, the skipper, and Philip Snyman, who led this team all the way to World Series glory last season, has got his first try in Dubai this time. Walker-Atch at scrum half, and he darts from the base, offloads nicely, and Uganda are away. And that's a very clever score for Solomon Okia. Agaba outside him, finds big Agaba, and he's away, all the way to the try line. That is some finish. It all started from Cecil Africa. Too late to win the match, but it's Wakarach, and he streaks down the blind side. And Philip Wakarach, who set up their previous score, and he's got one of his own. Lovely moment for Uganda here.
Now, Springbok coach Alistair Coetzee has made 5 changes to his starting 15 for South Africa's final test match of the year against Wales at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff. Blue Bulls fullback Warwick Gelant will start the wing in place of Kotnas Kosan, the player he replaced against Italy to make his Bok debut a week ago. Amongst the forwards, Tendam Tawarira has a groin injury and is replaced at loosehead by Stephen Kitsoff. A fit again Malcolm Marx comes in at hooker with Bongi Mbonambi moving to the bench. Sia Kolisi at flank and Dan de Priya at 8th man complete the personnel changes to the starting 15. There are further 6 changes to the bench with the possibility of test debuts for scrum half Louis Schrader and utility back Lucanio M. The Boks will be buoyed by their 35-6 win over Italy last Saturday, although after this tour, Coetzee faces a performance review which he is unlikely to pass. Now, South African rugby players are in high demand in Europe. Guinness Pro 14 side Edinburgh have 5 South African-born players in their ranks, with 4 of them in the squad to face the Southern Kings in Port Elizabeth tonight. Scottish international and former Cheetahs prop Avia Nel is a notable absentee. He's still recovering from a broken arm sustained a few weeks ago.
From the snowy and wintry Scotland to South Africa's sunny and blue skies, the depreciating rand and search for greener pastures are some of the main causes for the exodus of South African players to the Northern Hemisphere. Earlier this month, Jaco van der Walt was one of the 18 players whose contracts were not renewed by the Lions. The young fly-half has now found a new home.
Yeah, I'm very proud to be associated with the team. It's different than Super Rugby. It's a bit slower, you know, because the guys are used to playing in rainy weather. But yeah, like I said, I'm excited to be here. It's very awesome weather that they broadcasted for Friday night. So yeah, I'm keen for some running rugby.
Meanwhile, the Kings have included talented fly-half Kurt Coleman in the starting lineup. He replaces the injured Oliver Zono. Fullback Yao Penga and wing Anthony Volmink are doubtful starters for the match.
It must be a huge step up for us in terms of defence this week. And then obviously the synergy from the guys coming from the bench into the team in the last minute. And it's obviously for the players to understand that we are 23 and not 15 guys.
After 9 straight defeats, the Kings are determined to end the year on a high note. The next match is on the 5th of January in Edinburgh. Thabo Daniels, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.
Now, former world #1 Tiger Woods was very convincing in his much anticipated return from injury at the Hero World Golf Challenge in the Bahamas. Woods flashed a fist pump and did not seem bothered by his troublesome back. Competing for the first time after a near 10-month layoff during which he had spinal fusion surgery, Woods mixed 5 birdies with 2 bogeys for a 3-under par 69 on the island of New Providence in the Bahamas.
Woods stole the spotlight despite the elite field containing 8 of the world's top 10 golfers. He embarks on what could be his final shot at a comeback. His 69 left him in a 4-way share of 8th place and 3 shots behind England's Tommy Fleetwood after the first round of the elite 18-man event. He made some solid putts and impressive par saves. Woods, who turns 42 on the 30th of this month, is a 79 times winner on the PGA Tour, who was world #1 for a record 683 weeks. The 14 times major champion lost form in recent years due to injuries, and his ranking has plummeted to 1,199th. This marks the 2nd consecutive season that Woods has made his return to action at the tournament after a lengthy absence. So far, so good, as he drove mostly well off the tee. SABC News.
Now, FIFA praised the demand for World Cup 2018 tickets in the first sales phase, which ended 2 days ahead of the draw. Head of ticketing, Volker Eller, said the majority of tickets were sold to the host nation, Russia, with the United States soccer fans following despite the fact that they did not qualify. The draw for the event takes place later today in Moscow.
Kickoff in the 2018 World Cup comes a step closer on Friday as FIFA sets the field with the final draw. Inside Moscow's famed State Kremlin Palace Concert Hall, 32 teams will be drawn from 4 pots and placed into 8 groups of 4. Chris Unger is the inspection committee head for FIFA.
We have all the teams assigned to the pots according to their ranking. So the top 7 teams, along with the host, the traditional host, in pot 1, the next 8 best teams according to the world ranking in pot 2, and then so on, the lowest ranked teams in pot 4.
Soccer legends Diego Maradona of Argentina, Spain's Carlos Puyol, and Uruguayan forward Diego Forlán will draw the teams to determine the groups and then their positions within each group.
Everybody wants to know, the fans, the people, where to go, where to book the hotels, the planes. Friends are talking to me to pick up, and to see where they are going to be. So it's going to be nice to see the fate of all the national teams.
And it's Russia, the host. Russia, as the host nation, will be the top team in Group A as it seeks to make the homeland proud and reach the knockout stage for the first time since the collapse of the Soviet Union.
They played a friendly game in November.
That's where we're going to leave it for now. We'll be back at the top of the hour. You are watching Newsroom. Stay close. Elvis has got a whole lot more to bring to you.
A warm welcome to one of your favorite weekly review analysis programs, Media Monitor. So let's look at the race itself.
It's just becoming a personality contest where people just want somebody to guard their own vested interest. And I feel that the country is at a point now where we need some sort of change.
It is ANC policy that they will have to implement.
We fairly know the direction the ANC wants to take. As a leader, you have to implement.
So what was it like on the ground in Kenya?
Well, the country is divided. The country is very divided.
I think within the country, for me, the one person that I criticize severely, and I'm not very happy with his approach, is Raila Odinga, with him pulling out.
Stay tuned to Media Monitor and catch on analysts unpacking top stories every Sunday from 9 a.m.
A lot of us rely on tech to survive, and Africa is already a mobile-first continent.
We build mobile technology that connects motorcycle taxis to commuters and businesses in real time.
My phone was the most important thing.
Africans are using technology to innovate. On Network, we have African technology and social media news. Even robots have heard about us.
Hello, watch Network on SABC.
For African technology and social media news, join Ms. Phumelele Zondi on Network every Sunday at 9 p.m.
Lindy Wenoneba Sisulu was educated in Swaziland and in Canada. She was tortured in detention during apartheid for having banned ANC material. Lindiwe worked as a lecturer at the Manzini Teachers Training College in the mid-1980s. She joined the MK in exile and was intelligence operative. During 1990, when she returned to South Africa, she worked as President Jacob Zuma's PA.
As we are gathered here today, nourishing the fruits of liberation, we recognize that some of our gallant men and women with whom we fought in the deep, ugly trenches of war are not here.
She held numerous parliamentary positions since 1994, including Minister of Intelligence, Deputy Minister of Home Affairs, Minister of Public Service and Administration, Minister of Defence and Military Veterans, and member of the ANC's National Executive Committee. Lindiwe was awarded Human Rights Center Fellowship in Geneva in 1992, Presidential Award for Housing Delivery by the Institute for Housing of South Africa in 2004, and International Association for Housing Science Award in 2005. Lindiwe is the current Minister of Human Settlements.
Viva! It is a must. I, Lindiwe Sisulu, have committed myself to these principles. We must stop corruption. It is alien to our movement and it is harming us. We must unshackle ourselves from the stronghold of undemocratic processes. The ANC is not for sale. So for heaven's sake, don't let anybody buy your vote. And don't you buy anybody's vote.
It's a must.
It's 1100 hours Central Africa time right here on the Newsroom. It's the final hour. Jumbo Africa, Melvis Preston.
Good day, Bahay. Kendall Makamat. It's Friday and it's 5-2 already.
It's the final day, they say, yes, for the week. So today, it's World AIDS Day. That's the focus today. And we commemorate it with more than 7 million people in South Africa living with HIV/AIDS. And that's why we're asking this question.
Absolutely. We've been wanting you to get involved in the conversation. And we're asking you a very personal question today. Please do respond to this. We're asking you, what are you doing to stop the spread of HIV and AIDS in South Africa?
And when we talk about you, it's not just you personally. It's also your family, your community, people that you are with. What are they doing? So let us know what's on your mind. Let's take a look at what, in fact, you're not telling us right now. Let's take a look at the poll.
I want to know what you're doing.
So the poll here today, we're asking you, is HIV/AIDS prevention your responsibility?
Interesting, Elvis. We had 93% earlier on. Now it's 94% saying yes, it is our responsibility personally. 6% saying no. 264 votes have come in so far. Let's see what's being said on social media about this particular matter. And we'll make sure that we keep those coming throughout the course of the morning, because I think it will be quite interesting to see what those 94 and 6% are saying to us.
I'm more interested in terms of the 6%. What are you telling me? Why is it not your responsibility? But we'll keep them coming. But we're also asking a sporting question.
Absolutely. We had the Blitzbokke open their account of the new season this morning with a win against Uganda, 19-10. A little rusty, some are calling it. But I want to find out from you, for the Blitzbokke, who was the biggest threat to them defending the Dubai Sevens title? Nazim Grootboom has come in and has gone a little bigger than just Samoa. He says, well done, Blitzbokke, for the first win. Yes, now there's a true green fan there.
JG Duplessis says, well done, champions. Or the champies.
Yes, we've got a few more coming in. Black Mzungu says, beautiful try by Wakorach. Great show, Blitzbokke 1910. Obviously a Uganda fan there.
Bilal says, not the most clinical start, guys. Can't waste opportunities against the likes of Fiji and England. No doubt they'll step up their game in the second half. Now, earlier, Kendall, I saw the US were playing and they were behind, something like a 24-3.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is the beginning of the season, but we've got some big teams. We've got Fiji, New Zealand, the United States, and definitely Blitzbokke, as well as England. Those are the top teams that one needs to look out for in this season.
That's where we got to leave it now. Let's get down to business and take a look at your news headlines. People around the globe commemorate World AIDS Day, with South Africa focusing on preventing new infections. Metsi Maholo results are expected to be announced amid reports of wrong ballot papers being used on the voting stations. And the race for the ANC leadership hots up as 3 more ANC provinces are expected to announce their preferred candidate. Those are your headlines, and before we get there, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Elvis, thank you very much. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
Side him, finds big Agaba, and he's away.
World champions and the pride of the nation, the Blitzbokke kicked off the defense of their Dubai Sevens and World Series titles with a 19-10 victory over Uganda. And embattled Springbok coach Alistair Coetzee makes 5 changes to starting 15 for South Africa's final test of the year against Wales and Cardiff. It's almost time for the Telkom knockout final between Bloem Celtic and Vlaanderen PSL champions Bidvest. This is World AIDS Day. Make sure you stay with Elvis as he'll be bringing you very interesting interviews as well as news on this day.
Thank you, Kendall. Our top story this hour, the annual World AIDS Day commemoration has great significance for South Africa. South Africa has more than 7 million people living with HIV and has the biggest treatment program in the world. Now this year will be 29 years since the World AIDS Day celebrations was first held. The commemoration is dedicated to raising awareness of the AIDS pandemic caused by the spread of HIV infection. It also remembers and mourns those who have lost their lives because of the disease.
The Eastern Cape has the 3rd highest number of people living with HIV in South Africa. The OR Tambo region has the highest number of people infected in this province. Here, as in most parts of the country, social problems like the abuse of alcohol, unemployment and commercial sex are fueling the spread of HIV. Gangelizwe Township in Tata is a HIV hotspot.
There are 3 main reasons why we're bringing this event here. The first reason is that OR Tambo is the highest leading district in the Eastern Cape province in terms of HIV prevalence. Secondly, OR Tambo is the NHI pilot. We want to look at progress that has been made so far in terms of the NHI project. Thirdly, we've chosen OR Tambo because this is the year of OR Tambo. We wanted as the health and to be specific HIV sector to also participate in OR Tambo celebrations because we believe that one of his visions was to provide free health to all. And we think that that is the opportunity that the NHI is bringing forward. We think as part of this World AIDS Day heritage, we want to make sure that we give birth to a movement that will make sure that free health for all in the Eastern Cape and in South Africa becomes a reality in the next few years.
People living with HIV are appreciative of the interventions by the government and NGOs to fight the disease. They also encourage people to know their status and get treatment or continue to play safe.
Umuntu omameleyo othi osanda ufumana status sakhe into ba uphila ne-HIV ndingathi kuye.
If you have just tested positive to HIV, my advice to you will be that HIV is not a death sentence. There's also no time for asking who infected you. Treatment is available for all of us. We do not want to see anyone becoming sick to an extent that anyone can see that you are HIV positive. You do not wait until you are sick before you can take treatment. Just take your treatment and you will be fine.
Makabe nethemba loba uzophila makatye itreatment yakhe ngamaxesha onke kwenzela baphila ubomi obude.
Traditional leaders are also on board. Partnerships with relevant stakeholders are seen as key to conquer HIV/AIDS.
Even in the Royal Palace, we need condoms. We need an HIV HCT testing center here, so that every time people come for whatever reason to the Royal Palace, they can be accessing condoms, accessing treatment, accessing testing, accessing counseling, because it's about time that we make sure that our people are making sure that they work towards eradicating AIDS as much as we're working towards eradicating poverty.
The work done to reduce the number of infections and the wide-ranging treatment campaign is paying off. According to UNAIDS, HIV infections in South Africa have since 2010 decreased by 49% and AIDS-related deaths by 29%. Simkita Manqinana, SABC News, Eastern Cape.
Stigma and discrimination are one of the major challenges faced by people living with HIV/AIDS. Through community support groups, people living with HIV are able now to support each other and educate those who do not have the knowledge about the importance of taking ARV treatment and living a healthy lifestyle. As we commemorate World AIDS Day today, our reporter Zimkita Mkinana went into rural Eastern Cape and she filed this report.
This is one of thousands of HIV support groups across the country. Here, people affected and infected with HIV laugh, cry, and educate each other. The aim is to reduce HIV infections in the country and encourage those infected with the virus to take their treatment. Nonzaliseko Ntwana has been living with the virus for more than 12 years. She says it was difficult to accept her status, but through a support group, she started taking her treatment and living a positive life. She now shares her knowledge to help others.
We help one another with information. I disclosed my status, when I tested and why. Unfortunately, I never had access to the single pill treatment.
This LGBTI group also says it faces challenges relating to reinfection.
We are exposed in some areas where we get STIs, so when we visit our clinics we don't get the treatment as other people because they say you must come with your partner. Then if I bring you a Zim, in fact, if they say I must bring my partner, they assume that I must bring a man, of which I'm not dating men, I'm dating girls. So if you come with a lady, they discriminate you and they do some hate speech, so we end up not going to the facilities. In our facilities, we don't have the dental dams, the lubricants, and the finger condoms, so we have to buy them, of which we're not all working. So we are suffering a lot. We don't know how are we going to reach the 90-90 strategy.
Children living with HIV is another challenge. There are no visible support groups for them.
The ARVs should be told by their parents from their homes, so that they should be aware that they are using these ARVs and they should be able to accept their status. We as UTAC also need assistance from e-health facilities, from other organizations, so that we can conquer this HIV and AIDS.
UNAIDS has ambitions that by 2020, 90% of people living with HIV will know their HIV status, and those people diagnosed will receive sustainable antiretroviral treatment. Health NGOs say this will only be reached if they push towards working together, both in private and government sectors. Zimkita Mkinana, SABC News, Eastern Cape.
On this International World AIDS Day today, we turn our attention to a life-positive success story. Sibulele Sibaka, or Sibu, as she's affectionately known, an AIDS orphan turned businesswoman, author, motivational speaker, and so much more. She is a protege of Sir Richard Branson of the Virgin Group. You know him. Sibu grew up in the dusty streets of Kwalanga Township. She lost her parents to AIDS at the age of 16. She resolved from early on not to be a victim of her poverty-stricken surroundings and the additional impacted burden of AIDS. She joins us in studio. A very good morning to you and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is such a pleasure to meet such a positive young woman like yourself.
Thank you so much.
Now, first and foremostly, I would like to touch on your story because it is a very positive story to a certain degree because it didn't start off that way. Tell me your story.
You know, the ladies were just talking now about stigma and how that affects you. You know, I think when I look back, that's one of the first things that really affected my mother before the virus did. She really had a hard time accepting what was going on and accepting her status. And then after my dad died, I certainly felt discriminated against and I felt the stigma. You know, my parents had passed on, but people thought I was HIV positive, one. And even if they didn't think I was HIV positive, I was associated to HIV and AIDS. And therefore, they were scared, they were fearful, they didn't know how to treat me, how to handle me. And so it was like incredibly difficult. As a young person, I'm 16 years old, with my own issues as a teenage girl, and I'm trying to figure those out and figure out my life. And then to top it all off, I had that I had to deal with. So
how did you deal and cope with it?
You know, when I look back now, I can't say exactly what the toolbox kit was that I had, or these are the 5 steps that one should follow. The desire to live burnt a lot more than the desire to die. And I think every single day I made decisions that led me to my desire to live, and not just live, but live fabulously and live the extent of my life that I was meant to. You know, had my parents been alive, I know I would have had a great life. And so I wanted to continue the dream of having that life. And so I really can't tell you what it is that I did. I think I made the right decisions.
Did you have a lot of support, maybe from family, community, or elsewhere?
So I like to say that the whole saying that says it takes a village to raise a child is no longer the thing in Africa.
Ubuntu has fallen on the wayside.
It has, and I think there are reasons behind it. You know, of course there are still pockets of people who practice Ubuntu and who take in a child who is vulnerable and destitute. But I think more than anything, people have their own problems. People have their own challenges. Their own families are falling apart. And so to take on an additional burden of somebody else's child is something that they really can't do. So yes, when my parents were alive, we had this big family and lots of friends, the church community, and all those kind of fell away when my father passed away. You know, people disappeared, people didn't want to associate. My brother was my biggest source of inspiration and support. He's a couple of years older than me. His life came to a standstill so he could raise me. Of course, we have aunts and uncles, but like I say, people have their own problems. And now that you're an adult and you look back and you're like, yeah, I know, she was having problems. It's okay. So, you know, yeah.
So you grew up then with you and your brother?
It was just me and my brother. We were definite child-headed household until we lost our home because my father had not made the right financial decisions. My father, before he passed on, had cashed out our education policy so he can buy antiretroviral treatment. At the time wasn't free and extremely expensive. And so those are part of some of the decisions that he made to stay alive for a couple more years after my mom passed away, so that he can be around for us. But in the process, didn't make the right decisions.
What was it that came to a head for you at that particular point in time that made you the woman that you became?
Like I said, it was just the fact that I dreamt of being better. I dreamt of a better life. My dad, he loved my brother and I very much. My mom loved us very much. And I know that they had ambitions and dreams for us. And so I knew that they had lived out their life. What they were meant to do in life, they did. Here I was now, focused on their passing and how they passed, that I was not taking the opportunity to live out my life. And so when I joined Love Life, which was an HIV prevention organization and still is, that's when my purpose was molded. That it was now time, Sibu, yes, that happened to you. You didn't choose what happened to your parents, but you still have the choice on how you're going to respond to that. And I chose to respond in a positive way, and it kind of led me to where I am today.
Richard Branson, tell me about the connection.
So I'd started speaking for Love Life at the time. I was very young, in my early 20s, and I'd been with Love Life for about a year or two. And I was invited to come speak in Johannesburg, and he happened to be in the audience. He comes up to me after my speech, and he says, you know, great speech, and I say thank you, and he says, I'd like to offer you a job. I turned him down because I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who he was.
And then?
So I turned him down, and he was like, well, look, here's my card. If you change your mind, you know, let me know. A couple of days later, my CEO of Love Life, David Harrison at the time, says to me, so what did that gentleman want from you? And I'm like, he wanted to offer me a job. I mean, I'm an AIDS orphan, but I'm not desperate. I mean, he really looked like I love him very much, and he knows I mean well, but he looked like he hadn't washed for days. His hair hadn't been combed, and he just was not looking like somebody who should be offering any young black orphan girl a job, you know.
It looked a bit suspect.
He just looked a little dodgy, you know. And so when I turned him down, and so I told my CEO, no, I turned him down, and he's like, Sibu, you turned down Richard Branson. For a moment, I didn't know who Sir Richard Branson was. I was like, the Sir Richard Branson? And he's like, yeah, you just said no to that. Clearly, you're happy being paid 800 Rand a month, being a Love Life groundbreaker, instead of pursuing what he would have offered you. But, you know, I also believe in God and the fact that whatever's meant to you will always come for you. Yes. So a couple of weeks later, he called me to invite me to the G8 Summit, where I had a one-on-one with Tony Blair, and I kind of just told him about what amazing, you know, things young people in Africa are doing, and how we're tired of being part of the problem. We want to be a part of the solution now. We need help in ways of showing us how do we become part of the solution. And at that point, I realized that the world needed to see what African young people are about. And so I said to Richard, look, let me take that job of yours. And that's how I ended up working for him.
I tell you, young people out there needs a positive message. You are one of those. But what would be your personal message be to young people in this country? Because there's a question that we pose today, because prevention is better than cure. And we want to know from them, what are they doing to prevent the spread of HIV/AIDS? Yeah. Thoughts?
You know, there are a couple of things. One, prevention is my responsibility. My prevention is my responsibility. So for me to remain HIV negative is my responsibility and nobody else's. That's one. So every other young person out there needs to know that their status is completely in their hands. Now, I understand that there are many vulnerable young people out there who unfortunately cannot negotiate things like condom use, and so find themselves in those situations where they're having to decide between negotiating condom use or putting food on the table. And those are the realities we are having to face and live with in South Africa. And I say to them, irrespective of that, if you know what you want to achieve in life, it's easy for you to make the decision to look after yourself and say, no matter what happens, it's either we are using a condom or we are not having sex, because you understand exactly where you want to go in your life. And I tell you, when you know what you want to achieve, certain decisions are made automatically, because you know that certain steps you take are taking you away from what you want to achieve. So to those young people, keep strong, stay strong, know what you want. It's not the end of the world, and your future is completely in your hands.
You are my inspiration. Thank you so much, Sibu.
Thank you for having me.
That, you heard it from herself right here in studio. AIDS orphan turned successful businesswoman, author, motivational speaker, Sibulelo Sibaka, joining us here on the Newsroom. Didn't that make your day today? There's a question we pose to you. That question is a very important one on this day. What are you doing to stop the spread of HIV/AIDS in South Africa? We'll read those comments a little bit later, but we've got more news for you to follow. The announcement of the Metsimaholo by-elections in Sasolburg in the Free State after the ANC, the SACP, the DA, as well as the EFF, amongst other political parties, came head-to-head in a bid to have control of that area, and that announcement is expected to be made today. The elections has been marred by controversy, with reports of wrong ballot papers in one voting station in the by-elections being used. For the first time in the history of the tripartite alliance, the South African Communist Party contested the elections alone and not supporting its alliance partner, the ANC. We will cross that to that announcement as soon as it happens, so you have to stay tuned. You don't want to miss it. Mpumalanga ANC chairperson Didi Mabuza has promised to address the issue of unity within the ruling party during the long-awaited Provincial General Council today. Mabuza was speaking to journalists on the sidelines of the PGC a moment ago. Now, this PGC is critical to the party's National Elective Conference to take place here in Johannesburg this month. The provincial chairperson, David Mabuza, has been mum on who's the preferred presidential candidate between CR17 or NDZ. Instead, he's been calling for a unified ANC leading to the 2019 general elections. Both candidates have been out and about in Mpumalanga, gunning for support at the province which had come to be known as the kingmaker within the African National Congress. The province will be sending 736 voting delegates to the conference, making it the second biggest voting bloc after KwaZulu-Natal, which of course is mired in controversy, with some leaders not being accepted. Now, 3 ANC provinces, Mpumalanga, Northwest, as well as Gauteng, are expected to hold their provincial general councils, and we'll keep you abreast of those. But the ANC in the Eastern Cape has put forward the ANC Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, as its preferred candidate to succeed the President Jacob Zuma as the party president in December. The party in the province held its provincial general council in East London to establish its preferred candidates. Ramaphosa and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma were the 2 presidential candidates who garnered the most nominations, with Ramaphosa winning 423 to 61. It sounded like a cricket score.
That is Comrade Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa.
The Eastern Cape rallying behind Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa as the next ANC president. The OR Tambo region, the biggest region in the province, also nominated Cyril Ramaphosa as party president. Here, he received 115 nominations, while Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma received 11.
We are happy and delighted because democracy is alive and working in the African National Congress. That is the expression of the view and the wishes of the branches of the Eastern Cape. And we are supporting it, and we are going to work, use it as a basis to lobby other provinces about the outcomes of the National Congress.
The announcement comes at a time when the ANC in the province is divided in the wake of the tumultuous elective conference in September. Those disputing the legitimacy of the newly elected PEC registered but were not part of the PGC. These include the former chairperson, Phumulo Maswala.
We have a problem with comrades who are leading the states, senior comrades of our movement, who are always missing in the action. We continue engaging on policy discussions. Key people who are deployed by the African National Congress are not showing an interest, or they prioritize other things. This cannot be allowed. This cannot continue unabating. It is going to be stopped.
Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma was the preferred candidate of the Amatole region and garnered 45 nominations against the 34 for Ramaphosa.
The motion of no confidence against the mayor of the Nelson Mandela Metro, Ethel Trollip, has failed, with 65 votes opposing the motion and 54 votes supporting the motion. The Nelson Mandela Bay Council is a 120-seat council. That motion was brought by the Patriotic Alliance leader Marlon Daniels, and it was seconded by the UDM's Mongameli Bobani. Joburg Mayor Herman Mashaba also survived a motion of no confidence against him.
It's not a failure to me. It's not a failure to the Patriotic Alliance, and it's not a failure to the Black Caucus, who was in favor of the motion to carry. The positive that came out of it, at least the cat came out of the bag. We were always skeptical about the EFF, who claims that they are opposition, yet they are in coalition, unofficially so, with the DA. And this motion, we found out way before the time that they are not going to support this motion, but we thought it's in the interest of the public that we use this motion to illustrate to the broader community out there where the EFF are genuinely aligned.
But we've now weathered a very difficult storm, and we are now going to put our stamp on this government. There are a couple of opportunistic people in the city that want the status quo to remain, where they want to continue looting in the city as per the book of Chippy Olver. I put my foot down when I arrived here as the mayor against corruption, and my foot is not going to go up.
We can be able to say today as the UTM, this is a sad day, but this is not the end of the road. We are going to immediately put another motion That's what the residents want. We're going to put another motion so that in the next council meeting again, that motion will be debated.
We are still standing up on the resolution we have taken in 2016. We'll stand by it up until we see there's a need. But obviously we are guided by the structures of the organization in all the decisions that we have taken. Our people have been happy with the decision that we have taken, that we are not going to support the ANC. So our belief here was that this was just a ploy to bring the ANC back into power here, at which we are not going to allow.
The DA mayors of Johannesburg and Port Elizabeth have survived those motions to oust them. The city of Joburg mayor Herman Mashaba and the council speaker Vasco da Gama have been accused by the ANC of not delivering services to the people living in the city. But both motions of no confidence were defeated, with the EFF swinging the vote in the DA's favour. The Democratic Alliance has 104 seats, while the EFF has 30 and the ANC 121 seats. Let's move across to our borders now. Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa has appointed a cabinet that includes 2 senior military officers in key posts. The cabinet does not include figures from the opposition to the former president, Robert Mugabe. Mnangagwa appointed Sibusiso Moyo as the Foreign Affairs Minister. He is the Army General, as you can recall, who announced a military takeover, which saw Mugabe stepping down a week later. The long-serving Air Force Commander Perence Shiri is the new Lands and Agriculture Minister. Mnangagwa kept a sizable number of ministers from Mugabe's former cabinet, including Patrick Chinemase. Further afield now, a barrage of criticism has been leveled against the United States President Donald Trump after he retweeted anti-Muslim videos first posted by a far right-wing British party leader. The actions of the president has drawn fierce criticism from the United Kingdom, including the Prime Minister and several British MPs, Muslim groups, as well as members of the United States Congress. The White House has since defended the president's actions, while Trump called on the British Prime Minister not to focus on him.
A series of Trump retweets of a fringe British ultra-nationalist party shows Muslims committing acts of violence. Actions quickly condemned in the United Kingdom.
The fact that we work together does not mean that we're afraid to say when we think the United States have got it wrong, and to be very clear with them. And I'm very clear that retweeting from Britain First was the wrong thing to do.
Several members of the British House of Commons have lambasted the United States President for promoting inflammatory content targeting Muslims, with concerns raised that it paints the religion with a broad brush of inaccuracy.
Britain First is an extremist organisation which seeks to divide communities through their use of hateful narratives which spread lies and stoke tensions. The Deputy Leader of Britain First is subject to a pending criminal trial, accused of religiously aggravated harassment over the alleged distribution of leaflets and the posting of online material. British people overwhelmingly reject the prejudiced rhetoric of the far right, which is the antithesis of the values that this country represents: decency, tolerancy, respect.
But this overnight tweet from Trump tells the British Prime Minister not to focus on him, but on radical Islamic terrorism taking place in the UK. Quote, "We are doing just fine."
Look, again, whether it's a real video, the threat is real, and that is what the president is talking about. That's what the president is focused on, is dealing with those real threats, and those are real no matter how you look at it.
The president's latest actions viewed as a pattern, including the banning of immigration from Muslim-majority countries. The Council on American Islamic Relations has accused Mr. Trump of bigotry and white supremacy, while in the United Kingdom, calls are growing for the government to rescind an invitation for a state visit due next year. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, known for his Twitter spats with the United States President, has suggested he not be invited on any official visit to Britain. But for now, the trip appears to be going ahead, despite almost 2 million signatures petitioning the government to cancel it. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
Still in the U.S., the New York Times is reporting that the President, Donald Trump, is weighing up a final decision to replace his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who has only been in a job since February. According to the report, Trump has had a strained relationship with his chief diplomat for months and could replace him with the current CIA Director, Mike Pompeo before the end of the year. Our correspondent Sherwin Bryce Peace is in New York with this report.
It's reported to be a transition plan set in motion by the White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, but it's unclear whether President Trump has signed off on the plan. There'd been speculation for months that he'd soured on Tillerson after the Secretary of State allegedly referred to his boss as a moron behind closed doors, using an expletive before the word moron. If confirmed, Tillerson's ouster would be the latest in a long list of Trump associates, including his former National Security Advisor, Chief of Staff, Press Secretary, FBI Director, his Chief Strategist, and his Secretary of Health and Human Services, who have all resigned or been fired mere months into their jobs. Tillerson's reign has been described as turbulent at the State Department, with several reports that he'd been marginalized by the White House or undermined by the president himself on major foreign policy issues, including the Iran nuclear deal and diplomatic efforts with North Korea. Mr. Tillerson is on record as rebutting claims that he would quit as late as October this year, saying he had never considered leaving his post. President Trump himself in October said he had total confidence in his Secretary of State. Sherwin Bryce Peace, SABC News, New York.
The Law Society has slammed notices sent to 4 universities to jack up standards or risk losing their LLB courses. The Council on Higher Education issued a stern warning to the universities to conform within 6 months.
I think it will affect the university. I think outside the law faculty, there's a funding issue.
It's been 112 years since Enoch Sontonga died as a relatively unknown composer, choir master and teacher. But today his legacy lives on through his greatest composition, Nkosi Sikeleli Afrika.
For all your news updates, stay tuned to Your World from Monday to Sunday.
Welcome back. My name is Kendall Makamati. Time for the sports. Despite their poor ABSA Premiership form, Bidvest are favourites to win Saturday evening's Telkom knockout final. However, the students are up against the Premiership dark horses, that's Bloemfontein Celtic, who could cause an upset. The match will be played at the Princess Magogo Stadium in KwaMashu, with kick-off planned for 6 p.m.
We have a full squad basically, so the chances of us winning this one are high, and into the league as well, the same is going to happen. Everybody's back, we're fighting, we're pushing each and every day, and we really need to take this one. It's our only hope at this moment.
It is a very important game for us to play in Cup final. It's big motivation for us, for our players, and we are preparing to give our best in this game and to try to achieve the best result. It means to win the cup.
We break away from the sport. We've just started it, yes, I know, but we've got a very important day that we're celebrating. We're commemorating World AIDS Day, as the whole world commemorates those who lost their lives to HIV-related illnesses, those who live with the virus, as well as those affected by it. The main national commemoration of this day in South Africa is taking place at a number of areas in and around the country. In the Eastern Cape, one of the events for the day is an education workshop at the Ian Seku Secondary School, where Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa interacted with learners earlier. SABC reporter Unati Bingose has been following the Deputy President, who's also the chairperson of the South African National AIDS Council. We'll go live now to that event.
A true evangelist, and I would say a very effective and our best minister of health. But he is now he is also trying to masquerade as an astronaut and wants to send us to the moon. This is a very special day, and I have to apologize for there are a lot of things I would have wanted to respond to, and some of them touch on the message that we are going to put at the stadium, which is the commemoration of World AIDS Day. So I'm going to be very brief and just touch on a few things. I want to say this is a really special occasion that the World AIDS Day is being held here in the Eastern Cape, but more importantly, it is also being held here in OR Tambo district, but more importantly, up at the Royal Palace. We are grateful that this is not only the province, as the Premier said, of legends. This is also the home of legends. This is a great place of legends, and I was here a week ago, and I saw for myself why it is a great place of legends. But it is also important for us to hold the World AIDS Day here, because this is the year of the whole nation remembering our great legend and icon, O.R. Tambo. We couldn't be doing anything better than to have this World AIDS Day here and to close off the year of full commemorations by holding this event here, much as it deals with something that is concerning to the nation, but at the same time, we are making his dream and his life continue to live in the hearts of our people. And I want to also say, by holding it here, we are also recognizing the role of traditional leaders in this task that we are involved in. It is a deep recognition when our colleagues, Reverend Nebutalu, Dr. Buthelezi, and all the other colleagues who are part of SANAC, Secretariat and the organization, and when they brought it to us as SANAC and said, we would like to have this dialogue, a dialogue that must involve our traditional leaders. We took it up enthusiastically. And we took it up because it was in recognition of the role that is played by traditional leaders in the fight against HIV and AIDS. And today we had testimony. We had testimony of how our traditional leaders have been involved in this fight against HIV, but have also been utilizing our customs from the past. And this is where the interface between our customs and traditions comes in handy as we are engaged in this fight against HIV. Because you, as our traditional leaders, you are the custodians of the customs and the traditions of our people. You are the repository of all the norms, the standards, and the behavioral attitudes of our people. And our people hold you in high regard because you are the standard bearers. And we thank you for this role that you continue to play, and we thank you also for being involved in this struggle that we are waging against HIV and AIDS. And we'd like to thank you also for wanting to utilize our customs in joining in the prevention revolution. Because when you were saying that in terms of our customs, abstinence is the generally accepted behavior for young people, but especially for girls. And you even said that by so doing, we as SANAC are adopting what traditional leaders and the customs of our people are all about. And we thank you for that. What this means is that our prevention revolution, which we want to relaunch from now and into the coming year, is going to have a great partner in our traditional leaders as they get engaged and involved with us. And we therefore thank you for articulating that. This, in my view, has also been quite an enlightening engagement, much more franker than what I had envisaged. Ukuthiwa apha kuzawuthethwa ngazo zonke izinto. Wo, nawe Nkosi Mabuso wathetha ngenye into ke ukuthi ima kanjani, awusokugala into kanjani. So I just wish the young girls were not here when you were talking about it. But at the same time, we now have the courage as South Africans to talk about difficult things. Dala, it was not possible for men and women to sit and talk about sex publicly. It was not possible also to talk about it in the presence of our kings and traditional leaders. Namhlanje sithetha ngayo, we are also able to thetha ngokuthi inkwenkwe ikhama so, and then when you get older it goes down. I didn't want to hear that. Maybe you're talking for yourself. But it's also good when we can sit here and listen to our young girls standing in front of us, pledging that they have voluntarily decided to abstain and to remain virgins. And we need to applaud them for that. For them to stand in front of all of us and their parents to talk about such difficult and sensitive things means that as a nation, as a people, we are maturing and we are beginning to talk about important things that affect the nation and that affect our people. We've also been able to talk about education. That education plays a critical role in the development of a nation, in the development of a country, but also, as Minister Motsoaledi was saying, in the She Conquers program that we have, education is a critical component of that. Because we want to keep our young people in school, in education, particularly our young girls. Now, I want to talk about education from another different angle. A different angle which I have been talking about but also experiencing as we go around. Many of us will know Uti class when the new year starts, 1 million of our children enroll. 1 million of them enroll for the first time in school. 12 years later, only 450,000 of them write matric. You have to ask yourself, where has the 550,000 ended? They end up in space. Dr. Muzwaleli has not told me what he has taken them to the moon yet. So they are not on the moon. Baphelela apha in our homes, in our families, and these are young people who have dropped out. They drop out not because they don't have money necessarily to continue with school, because 85%, almost 90% of our schools are now fee-free schools. That is not the reason. Why are they dropping out? And some of them say, and I often make it my job when I go door-to-door visits. Then they tell you, then they tell you, they are no longer at school and they have not passed matric. All sorts of reasons are told. Pregnancy, dropping out because dropping out because of teacher and so forth. I raise this in the light of what Dr. Muzwaleli also said. As parents, and this is where Amakos et Nokumkani come in. This is where we've got to highlight the importance of education. This is where we've got to tell parents that they must insist that their children must stay in school. And this is where, at a family level, abazali, they must say, education, at least until grade 12, is compulsory. Something drastic must be done at that household level. And Okumgani and our chiefs can help us with this. Because if in a village, if in an area, it can be said, Uguti, it's compulsory that our children must be in school for 12 years, we will start an education revolution. Our children will stay in school for 12 years until matric. Because education at that level is free now. And we must insist that this investment that we are placing in education realizes a dividend. And Tina, as abazali, as shareholders, we must insist that no child must ever drop out of school. Whether she gets pregnant or not, once the baby is born, she must go back to school and finish the grade 12. Another issue, which is also being talked about, as Tetang and I are, but it is being talked about in the nation, and I'm glad that a number of our traditional leaders are taking a stand on it. Ile practice yokuthwala. We need to pay attention to it because the women in our nation are crying out that this practice must be addressed, and this is a practice that violates human rights. We haven't spoken about it today, and I would like us to pay attention to it because it is dragging our country backwards. We take another program which was being led by Okumgani, and I want to speak out and say I'm in full support of it. The idea that Okumgani, they can have a structure a structure that focuses on HIV, AIDS, and tuberculosis is something that I support, and I'd like us to revive it. Because when we have such a structure, yes, and indeed Archbishop Jasi, if we can get it funding, and we can find funding, it basically means we will be able to cover all those provinces where HIV is prevalent and it is at a higher level. Dobozan spoke about support for education, bursaries, NSFAS. Uguti is not available to all students. We know that. What we want to see happening, and we are going to make sure it happens, would all young people who are in higher education, who come from poor families, must, yes, be able to get free education. That is what we want. We are working and we're trying to finalize that. The governing party has taken a strong position on this, and this is what we would like to see, because young people like you, standing here, and all the others that accompanied you, need to know that their education, that they have access to education, that they will be able to have their education funded, particularly when they come from poor families. So we will make sure that that dream that you articulated here is realized. Abefundisi, aba-concerned, bivile mfundisi wami, bivile ukuthi ni-concerned kakhulu. Masiyeke apho ukuthi sivile, sive kakuhle futhi. Ayikho enye into endinoyithetha ngaphandle kokuthi sivile, and ivile futhi ngale ndlela okuyithetha ngayo. I also picked up the emotion and the strength of the message. Sivile. Masibulele business, that the business community has joined very strongly in this fight against HIV and AIDS. Namhlanje, there's going to be an input from one of the key business leaders in our country, from the Chamber of Mines, at the rally, and we will welcome the announcement that they are going to make. We applaud business for not only talking about HIV and AIDS, but also doing something very practical. Doing it by going the extra mile, by making sure they do not only look after the men who are infected on the mines, but they also come down to where those men come from, to the households, and do something about it. Let us give the business community a round of applause. Yes, it is men that we must focus on. Men must be focused on, as Dr. Mutsualedi is putting his plan together of taking, how many are we now in the country? We are 55 million. As Dr. Mutsualedi is trying to get 50% of the men to go to the moon, it will take him quite a long time to do that. We must focus on men and have dialogues with men, because it is men, and not only men, but young boys. We need to deal not only with issues related to HIV and AIDS, we also need to deal with gender-based violence. We have found, Archbishop Jasi and I and others, we held a dialogue of men in Soshanguve, and they led it, and they were launching a campaign to focus on men, on issues of violence, abuse of women, and this is the 16 days that all of us must get involved and speak out against abuse of women and children. And we need, therefore, to spread the message throughout the country and have more and more dialogues which will involve young men on issues of HIV/AIDS, on issues of gender-based violence. So men, before you go to the moon, we want to focus on you as men so that by the time you go to the moon, at the very least, when you are on the moon, you should be well conscientized when it comes to HIV issues and the gender-based violence. You've allowed us to come here, and we are going to say much more at the rally. I want to thank and applaud the organizers of this dialogue. This is by far the best dialogue I've been to dealing with this matter, and I want to thank you all for your participation. This has been most meaningful because we've come out with good resolutions, good decisions, and good suggestions as well.
Thank you very much. You may be seated.
All right, live from the Eastern Cape there, where